This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand.
Here we go. Yes, that was embarrassing. Anyway, the London Assembly is the voice of London, composed of 25 members elected at the same time as the Mayor in order to hold him to account and scrutinise his policies. Can I welcome members, officers and the public here in the gallery and watching on the webcast. This is a Mayor's Question Time meeting of the Assembly, which means that all members are invited to attend and ask questions of the Mayor. In case of an emergency and any need to exit the building, guests seated in the public gallery should follow security staff and Assembly members should follow the clerk. Please may I remind you to silence your devices, and can I ask Mayor and members to position their microphones so that they can be heard clearly, moving it closer to you by picking it up from the base as required. And of course, turning it on is a good idea as well if you're about to speak. Members are also reminded that any electronic devices should not be placed in front of microphones. Can I ask the clerk, Rebecca Arnold, to confirm any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies for absence today from Assembly members Bailey, Cooper, Clark, Rogers and Dr Sahota, and Assembly member Prince is attending remotely today.
Thank you. Can I welcome to the public gallery visitors from the Youth Parliament of Pakistan? We're there. You're all there. Good to see you. Since the last all-Assembly meeting at the plenary on the 6th of July, for the first of two meetings looking at London's waters, the Environment Committee questioned Thames Water on pollution and the long-term water supply available in London, and the provider's current financial position and long-term sustainability. The Budget and Performance Committee examined the delivery of the Mayor's 2022-23 budget and the reasons behind the key variances between budgeted and actual income and expenditure. The GLA Oversight Committee considered the GLA Workforce Report and the findings from the Equal Group Independent Review into the experiences of Black, Asian and ethnic minority staff at the GLA. The Transport Committee looked at the transport challenges faced by residents in Outer London, examining plans to improve transport links and asked what the Mayor is doing to encourage other forms of transport other than the private car, with the ULEZ set to expand to Outer London in August. For the first of two meetings on London's labour market, the Economy Committee discussed London's post-pandemic labour market, including employment trends, vacancies, skill gaps and working practices. The Fire, Resilience and Emergency Planning Committee questioned the London Fire Brigade on how it is adapting to and mitigating for climate change, in particular the key risks of flooding and wildfires. And the Police and Crime Committee met to discuss the biggest challenges facing local policing and whether basic command units are sufficiently resourced to reduce crime, investigate crime and improve public confidence in the police. And the Housing Committee held the second of a two-part meeting investigation into young Londoners' access to home ownership. So we've done a lot. But that's not just in committees. We also, as chair of the Assembly, along with other members, it was an honour to meet Vadim Boychenko, the mayor of Mariupol, at City Hall last week. We heard the inspiring story of Mariupol's rebuild and learnt how the city is shaping its future post-conflict. And we stand in solidarity with the people of Mariupol and the whole of Ukraine in the face of war. I also attended the 7/7 memorial ceremony to lay a wreath on behalf of the Assembly and mark 18 years since the devastating terrorist attack in 2005. London will always stand united in the face of terrorism. Can I ask the Assembly to note the interests set out at item 2? And do Assembly members have any other disclosable pecuniary interests which relate to the items on the agenda for today's meeting, or any other relevant interests, including any declarations in relation to gifts and hospitality which are not reflected on the authority's register of gifts and hospitality? We're okay there. Can I ask the Assembly to confirm the minutes of the Mayor's Question Time meeting held on the 22nd of June to be signed by me as a correct record? Now, can I ask the Assembly to formally receive the Mayor's report covering the period from the 9th of June to the 6th of July? And the Mayor will now provide an oral update of 5 minutes in length on matters occurring since the publication of his report. Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, everyone. Can I associate myself with your remarks about Ukraine and 7/7, Chair? Can I start by taking the opportunity to congratulate Assembly Member Susan Hall on securing the nomination to become the Conservative Party's mayoral candidate. I also want to congratulate Assembly Member Sean Bailey on his introduction to the House of Lords, and to Sian Berry on being selected as the prospective parliamentary candidate for Brighton Pavilion. You'll all forgive me if I don't wish you too much luck in your respective positions. Chair, bearing down on violent crime and making our city safer for everyone is my #1 priority as Mayor. Since 2016, youth knife crime, gun crime and burglary have all fallen, and the number of homicides in London last year was the lowest it's been for almost a decade. But I'm worried that the progress we're making could be jeopardised this summer by the unprecedented level of economic hardship facing many Londoners. I have serious concerns that parents and carers will struggle to afford activities for young people during the holidays, leaving children at greater risk of being exploited and getting sucked into gangs and violence. In London, we're doing everything we can to not only be tough on crime, but tough on the causes of crime. This includes funding 10 million free meals for low-income families during the holidays, providing mentors for 100,000 young Londoners in need of support, and giving £3.5 million to community-led organisations so they can run programmes this summer that are targeted at young Londoners at risk of getting involved with violence. We're stepping up with new investment and initiatives, but given the scale of the cost of living crisis, it's time for the government to show similar resolve. That's why I'm calling on the Prime Minister today to provide emergency funding for councils across our city so that they can deliver more preventative activities for young Londoners this summer. Chair, I've been asked for 2 urgent oral updates. I'll go to Caroline Pidgeon's one first on step-free stations. Since 2016, by increasing the number of step-free stations, additional average journey times on the TfL network for people who need accessible routes have reduced by 40%, progressing towards my accessibility target of 50% reduction by 2041. In line with this ambition, Transport for London has announced its next steps to make 12 more London Underground stations step-free. In addition to work at Leighton and Colindale, feasibility studies will take place at the 10 stations. Works to make Colindale and Leighton stations step-free are planned to start in 2024, subject to government approving the business case. The 10 further stations are in different parts of London and in different ticketing zones to help better connect customers across London. Starting now and running through next year, the stations will be assessed in detail to understand the work needed. One key challenge is funding, and TfL is working with boroughs and development partners to identify funding opportunities, including opportunities for government funding. The work to make the first of these new stations step-free would complete by 2026. TfL has plans to review more stations for feasibility in 2024 and 2025. I've been asked for a second oral update from Assembly Member Devonish on Park Lane Cycle Lane. In 2020, with government support, TfL introduced a 2-way cycle track and a bus and taxi lane on the northbound side of Park Lane. Up to 2,400 cyclists a day now use the track, an increase of over 300% since 2019. This north-south corridor is in the top 10% of routes in London for current cycling rates and the top 10% for potential increases in cycling in the future. TfL received 3,171 responses to its consultation on the scheme. The detailed consultation report provides information on frequently raised comments. 53% of respondents thought that the scheme would encourage many more people to cycle, and 49% said that fewer people would use private vehicles for personal private journeys. 570 respondents provided a Westminster postcode indicating they live in the borough. The consultation has helped TfL to develop a series of further improvements to the scheme that they're actively investigating and will look to implement subject to funding. TfL will also continue monitoring the scheme.
Assembly Member Pigeon.
Mr Mayor, I welcome the further progress on step-free stations in London that you outlined. However, a recent question to the Department for Transport confirms that level boarding will not be available on Elizabeth Line services at the new Old Oak Common station, meaning that not all Elizabeth Line stations will provide step-free access. Are you aware of this, Mr Mayor?
Chair, I am, and can I say the Assembly Member has been assiduous in campaigning for more step-free. We're looking into this, and I'm more than happy for the Commissioner and the Chair of the relevant committee to write to the member to give her an update in relation to progress we hope to make on that. As she's aware, we're really proud, and she's been a critical friend of TfL in this regard. All 41 stations are step-free at the moment. It'd be heartbreaking if, when HS2 comes down, there wasn't step-free there as well.
Yeah, I just think in today's world, it beggars belief that a brand new station cannot be fully step-free when, as you describe, people will arrive on HS2 with luggage, buggies, mobility aids. Are you taking this up directly yourself with the Department for Transport? And can I urge you to write further on this? Because I think this is an absolute scandal.
Of course I can. And can I just, what compounds your point is this isn't a station today. It's one in 10 years' time.
Exactly.
And secondly, for a number of years, Euston may not be open, which makes your point even more important. Chair, I'm happy to personally get involved as well as the Commissioner.
Lovely. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Assembly Member Devonish.
Good morning, Mr Mayor. Are you prepared to actually break down the entire 3,171 by postcode, please, in each of the boxes for and against?
I'm sure I can ask the Walking and Cycling Commissioner to write to the member with whatever information we've got.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nobody else on those? Right. We now move to the questions on the priority order paper. Each group is allocated an amount of time to ask their questions that is proportionate to their size. The first question is number 2661, Cleaner Energy in London, from Assembly Member Bukhari.
Good morning. Thank you for your question. London is already facing the impacts of the climate and air quality emergencies, from flooding, heat waves and wildfires to around 4,000 premature deaths annually due to toxic air. I'm taking decisive action to cut emissions and pollution from road transport, including expanding the ultra-low emission zone to the whole of London next month, and supporting the uptake of electric vehicles across our city, all of which will help reach my net zero 2030 target. In 2022, over a quarter of all new car registrations in London were plug-in vehicles, meaning battery, electric or plug-in hybrid. That's up from just 9% in 2020. By the end of 2022, 4% of London's total registered car fleet was plug-in, up from under 2% in 2020. London has nearly 14,000 public charge points, of which 940 are rapid charge points. That's a third of the UK's total and the highest number of public rapid charge points in any Western European city. In 2018, I established the Mayor of London's Energy Efficiency Fund, MWEF, a public-private investment fund to help London achieve its 2030 net zero targets. To date, MEF has provided support for 8 EV projects with a total investment value of around £43 million. Projects have supported the rollout of zero-emission taxis, electric buses, electric refuse collection vehicles and EV charging infrastructure. I've also made other funding available, such as my Green Finance Fund, which can support more public bodies to switch to EVs. London has demonstrated leadership in this area, and our policies are helping to provide regulatory certainty to businesses, with organisations like Volta Trucks, whose new site in Tottenham I've visited recently, making London their home. Strict licensing requirements for London's black taxis also mean that the number of zero-emission taxis continues to grow, now making up almost half the fleet. But we need the same level of commitment at the national level. The Committee on Climate Change recently highlighted that the government is missing its climate targets on nearly every front. Now is the time for them to redouble their efforts and show that the UK can follow the lead of its cities and be a global leader.
Mr Mayor, you mentioned trust there. Londoners trust you to invest their tax money responsibly. They also want a cleaner, greener and more sustainable city to which to live in, and they trust you to work towards this on their behalf. Last month it was revealed that following a poor investment decision that you just mentioned, the Mayor's Energy Efficiency Fund is actually set to lose millions in taxpayers' money as the electric vehicle firm Breathe goes into administration. £3 million invested by the GLA on your watch in a start-up that has now collapsed a mere 15 months later. Now, do you agree this is not good enough and you've let Londoners down?
Chair, I'm sorry to disappoint the member. That's just factually incorrect. So the position is that Breathe have been purchased by Autocar Limited, with the sale including the novation of the loan to the new owner. The £3.2 million investment is secure. The amount of money invested by MWF to Breathe was less than 1% of the total money invested. There is an investment committee that looks into all investments. There's due diligence, there's research, there's an investment policy. There's a fund manager who's not the Mayor of London, but Amber Infrastructure. And so disappointing to the member, great news to everyone who worked at Breathe and all those at Autocar Limited and to Londoners caring about this issue, is that there isn't a loss to the taxpayer or to the private sector working with the Mayor's Energy Efficiency Fund.
Well, I hope that you know, that you are correcting that. That's not what we've been hearing, and we've heard lots of things from you before about your green credentials. You've even got a book out, and you do need to own up to the mistakes that have been made and take responsibility. You are the Mayor. The GLA funds are invested in your behalf, and responsibility does lie with you. So, for example, there's been serious error of judgments when it comes to London's Solar Together scheme. Many Londoners will have opted into the scheme because of your backing as the Mayor of London. They trusted you. Around 1,000 customers now find themselves in a state of limbo, having paid hundreds of pounds in deposits for work that they have not had completed. Now, will you now apologise for those Londoners affected by this failure and guarantee that all customers will receive their deposits back, even if that means reimbursing them directly?
So, Chair, the question was about the Mayor's Energy Efficiency Fund, and the member was disappointed. It's been a success and no loss of money to the taxpayer. We've now moved on to a separate scheme, not funded by the Mayor's Energy Efficient Fund, but funded by people joining together to buy their solar panels using economies of scale. I apologise at the last Mayor's question time in answer to a question raised by Sean Berry about the huge inconvenience and distress caused to those customer. I'll be later on giving an update in answer to a further question from a member of the Assembly about the work that's being done. But I'm sorry that all those who want to do the right thing and get solar panels have been let down by Get UK. We from City Hall have been working closely with iChooser, more than 150 public authorities across the country, including Lib Dem ones, who I'm sure the member will equally criticise, have had their customers, their constituents let down. We're doing more than any other public authority across the country to support our customers.
The fact is, though, people were trusting your badge as the Mayor of London to choose this initiative, and there's been 385 complaints against Get UK in phase 4 of the scheme. For some reason, it was again selected by the GLA to take part in this latest phase, and 139 refunds have been verified by the GLA, and too many customers now find themselves with incomplete installations. And they trusted you, Mr Mayor, because you put your name to this. Given these poor investments, why should Londoners trust the Labour Mayor of London on future environmental initiatives?
Let me try and finish this answer. So it's not the Mayor that chooses the subcontractor that iChooser engage with anywhere across the country. No public authority chooses the subcontractor iChooser engages with. The contracts between the GLA and iChooser, we are disappointed with Get UK, who were only used in phase 4 and phase 5. In phase 5, there were other subcontractors who've been able to take over the work. In phase 4, there weren't. There were a small number of people who've been inconvenienced. I've apologised.
Will they get their money back? Let's just have the answer to that. Yes or no?
Well, there are negotiations with iChooser. I'm sure what she wouldn't like to do is to jeopardise those negotiations by expressing publicly without prejudice conversations taking place. We have organised, though, for a private briefing tomorrow for members of the Assembly in a closed session, so members are aware of the latest update in the negotiations, because it's important that members are kept update in relation to the negotiations. But what I can't do, Chair, is prejudice those negotiations by airing publicly the progress made so far.
Thank you. Assembly Member Pigeon. Sorry.
In the last 8 months for around 180 rapid and ultra-rapid public charging points in London. However, there remains a real concern about the number available for the black taxi trade. And you mentioned earlier, half the fleet of taxis now is zero emission. A year ago, can people hear me?
Can we suspend the time for Assembly Member Pigeon?
Okay.
Individual mic, there's some interference, Chair. So if you persevere, it will carry on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll start again. Okay. Mr. Mayor, in terms of cleaner energy, you have announced plans in the last 8 months for around 180 rapid and ultra-rapid public charging points in London. And as you mentioned earlier, half the fleet are zero-emission taxis. But there are real concerns around that number available for the black taxi trade. A year ago, you agreed for the Deputy Mayor to meet with myself and some taxi drivers about EV taxi hubs. There was one meeting in August and one email in December. Nothing came out of this, despite us having the private sector ready to invest. So, Mr. Mayor, will you personally look again at using some of the spaces at taxi rest and refreshment ranks to install ultra-rapid charging points?
The member will be pleased to know that those conversations are ongoing. So there is a quarterly London Charge Point Operators Forum to discuss these sorts of issues, including how we encourage the private sector infrastructure delivery in London, including around cab ranks and where there are taxis readily available. The good news is, as I've said, we've got more rapid charging points than any city in Western Europe. We're on course to increase those, the targets we set for 2025, but we're always more than happy to look at more suggestions, and I'll ask the London Charge Point Operators Forum to get in touch with the member so they can reassure her that if there are any other ideas that they've not pursued, they can be pursued as well.
Thank you. I mean, I know from conversations that I've had with taxi drivers that they are struggling still to find places in central London where they can charge their electric vehicles and get back to work quickly. And I've been working with drivers and a private sector partner to work with organisations such as Network Rail to develop this idea of EV taxi hubs across the capital. So I'm wondering, you've talked about this forum, but I'm wondering, can you use your office and influence to help us sort of break through, quite honestly, a bit of bureaucracy and establish some EV taxi hubs at convenient locations across our city to help our black taxi drivers charge up their electric vehicles?
Chair, more than happy to. In fact, that's not the evidence. The evidence is that there are problems in outer London more than central and inner London. And so we've done lots of work in outer London. There's some good news coming in Sutton and Croydon on exactly the point that she's making about rapid charging point availability across London. If you did a bird's eye view of London, it's not spread evenly as it should be for obvious reasons. And one of the reasons is because in central London there's greater demand. That's where the private sector's gone, which meant in other parts of London where there's less demand but equal need for, if you're a taxi driver living in Redbridge or Croydon or Sutton. And so I'm more than happy to respond directly to her point about the central London investment. But just so she knows, the evidence that we've got is the real need is in outer London, but I'm more than happy to speak to her offline about this.
But I think there's a real opportunity with Network Rail and the train companies to look at ranks at stations. Some may well be in outer London where they have some space, that if you can have the infrastructure there, that would really help transform the use of black taxis across the capital.
It's a fair point. I wasn't being at cross purposes. I accept her point. I was just making the other point. There is also need in outer London. And then the good news about Network Rail is our relationship with them has never been better. And I'm sure with the chief exec of Network Rail and the commissioner being sent what you've said, I can follow this up as well to make sure that's because the point you're making is there's an opportunity there that may not be used, and some of it's just checking there's the right facilities and the swap over stuff. But I can follow that up, Chair.
And I know there are private partners ready to work on this, so it makes sense. Lovely. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next question comes from Assembly Member Polanski, and it concerns universal basic income trials.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be keen to see a pilot exploring the applicability of universal basic income in London. I previously commissioned analysis to better understand the costs and benefits of the policy that showed a potential positive impact on poverty levels, but at a substantial financial cost. I'm aware of a number of UBI studies and pilots already underway across the UK and Europe, and my officers and I will consider their findings. I've shared the findings of the research I commissioned with ministers for their consideration. I noted with interest the recent proposals for a micro-pilot in East Finchley. GLA officers are meeting with the representatives from Autonomy and Grange Big Local, the organisations behind the proposal, to understand more about their work. However, it remains the case that running a pilot in London of the scale necessary to generate meaningful insight would require significant investment, which would mean support from government. At the moment, that support isn't there, so someone else would need to fund a pilot. The GLA is not in a position to do so. I do agree with the general principle of universality. That's demonstrated by my decision to make funding available to extend free school meals to all primary school children next year, which will allow more than 250,000 more children to receive the benefits of free school meals. Between that work and my emergency-free holiday and weekend meals programmes, which provide the equivalent of 10 million meals to London families, I hope it's clear that I'm working to ensure we reach and support as many people as possible. In the face of government opposition, we continue to fund free travel on all TfL services for under 11s, free bus and tram travels for under 18s, and free travel for over 60s. We've also done a huge amount of work helping Londoners to access support. We've made £2.3 million available to London Citizens Advice and the Legal Support Trust networks this year to boost their capacity to help Londoners understand their rights and entitlements during these challenging times. This has already delivered significant income gains for Londoners. All this work has something in common. We're stepping up to support Londoners where the government should be providing the basics.
Thank you for your answer. I'd like to start, first of all, by commending you, actually, for co-signing a letter with myself, Labour mayors around the country and the Green Party leadership, calling on the Prime Minister to support universal basic income trials across the country. In fact, I was in Newcastle last week at Northumbria University, where Professor Matt Johnson, with a brilliant team, have done lots of research around universal basic income and the public health benefits, and indeed they've done that research with Campus and Autonomy. I'm just curious, what do you see as the potential benefit of universal basic income for Londoners?
I've also seen the research he talked about and the health benefits. I think all the studies, including around the world, confirm the health benefits. For me, the important thing is to see if this leads to people not falling through the cracks, falling through the nets. We do know, for example, many people in London who are working are in poverty. We also know people who are not working, receiving benefits, are still in poverty. And some of the evidence is mixed in relation to does it disincentivize people. In my view, the evidence is mixed there. I don't subscribe to school of thought where people are disincentivized to work by receiving a UBI. What motivates me is the evidence. Do the pilot, look at the evidence, and if it works positively, scale it up.
Yeah, I'm not convinced any of the research shows that it does disincentivize people. That's sometimes quoted from Finland, but that wasn't even the criteria they were looking at, and I think at best it just looked like it was neutral. But moving on to more positive news, I'm delighted to hear you mention Grange Big Local in East Finchley. I think this is a really exciting moment where a group of Londoners are coming together to make this happen on their own, but this doesn't exist in a vacuum. I think there's millions of ordinary Londoners who are just sick of the situation that's happening and looking for different answers. Now, the findings of this pilot will be so valuable in driving forward this whole conversation around UBI and potentially starting London on a path to becoming a fairer city with less poverty. In fact, I think the research you commissioned showed it could lift 160,000 Londoners out of poverty. So will you take this opportunity to publicly lend support to Grange Big Local?
For the sake of completeness, in the Finland story, the government chose in Finland not to continue with the pilot or to scale it up, which in itself speaks volumes. Other pilots have been done which have been finished and not been scaled up, so that's why it's really important to look at the evidence. My team's meeting Grange Big Local, I think today.
Yeah.
So once the officers have met with Grange Big Local, subject to what's been said, if there's a good case for support, of course I'll support the pilot that they're looking into in East Finchley. There are questions about funding and stuff which can be worked out in the conversations we have with them later on today.
And I'm really excited you're meeting them this afternoon, and your team are. You'd at least applaud, I guess, Londoners coming together to look for schemes. Listen,
it's fantastic. And the great thing about this scheme is that there'll be two schemes, one in London and one in Jarrow, which is the symbolism is obviously very important in relation to poverty and so forth. But of course, it's a really good thing. And I've always said one of the things we're going to try and encourage people to do is not see themselves as consumers, but as citizens. And this is a really good example of citizenship.
It's really good to hear you applauding that. What conversations have you had with your team about potentially funding a trial like this? I know you still need to meet them before you can maybe reveal too much about that.
We've had a number of conversations. As I said in my answer in the substantive question, it's simply not possible for us to fund this scheme. We need government support. There are two big reasons why we're going to be a bit nervous about funding a scheme, aside from the fact we can't afford it. One is it becomes a taxable income, which means it could just end up going back to the Treasury. Secondly, and it could mean that people who receive the UBI are no longer eligible for some benefits, the way universal credit works and housing benefit works. And that's why there's a meeting with Grange Big Local. The pilot in Wales had the support of national government, bigger scale, bigger funding. And so, the obvious advice is to wait and see the results of the Welsh pilot rather than spending more taxpayers' money in a pilot in London, which is just too small for the results to be meaningful in terms of scale. The numbers involved. There
is something called the Better Off mechanism, which they're using in Wales to make sure that anyone on a basic income is not worse off. And I think the way you do that is by making sure the amount is enough, even if you are on benefits or you're sanctioned. But I'm out of time, but this conversation will continue, I'm sure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question concerns wedding cake and is in the name of Assembly Member Best.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the question. I've assumed that this question refers to recent media reports and adverts for a theatre show. My understanding is that a compliant advert ran on TfL's network between the 3rd and 16th of July as originally booked and began on schedule. The initial advert featuring a wedding cake was not compliant with TfL's advertising policy. In line with the London Food Strategy, TfL's advertising policy restricts the advertising of foods and non-alcoholic drinks high in fat, salt or sugar, known as HFSS. The guidance clearly stipulates that the restrictions extend beyond purchasable items, so includes text references to food, cartoon imagery, and incidental images of food. TfL is one of the most valuable advertising estates in the world and maintains a comprehensive and rigorous advertising policy and copy review process. It's essential that TfL and its media partners are consistent in applying the policy. It's a client's responsibility to ensure the products and adverts they propose are compliant with the policy. To do this, they need to score the product using the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities, OHID's, nutrient profiling model. The nutrient profiling model is widely used and has been subject to thorough scientific scrutiny, extensive consultation and review. The model is the best way of identifying HFSS products that contribute to childhood obesity, and all the evidence shows that the TfL policy works. The London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine's initial evaluation of the TfL policy was published in the Public Library of Science, a peer-reviewed journal, in February 2022. Their evaluation focused on purchases of unhealthy foods made by households. It found that the policy contributed to households buying up to 1,000 fewer calories of energy from unhealthy foods each week, and a reduction in sugar purchases per week of up to 81% from products such as chocolate and confectionery. A second independent evaluation from the University of Sheffield's School of Health and Related Research was published in the International Journal of Nutrition and Physical Activity in July 2022. It estimated that the policy was associated with 94,867 fewer cases of obesity, among other health benefits, and projected savings for the NHS of over £200 million. TfL is proud to have delivered more than 13,000 advertising campaigns on its network during 2022-2023. TfL continues to deliver high-quality and engaging advertising throughout London with its media partners. It's always happy to work with brands to help them follow its advertising policy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You presume correctly. The advert that you referred to in your answer there for Tona and Tina's wedding, a dinner show at Wonderville Haymarket, featured a free-tier sponge cake, and as you said, that was denied access to be displayed on London's transport network after the team in their marketing department spent £20,000 on designing and issuing those posters. Is that right? Is that what do you believe it's right that the wedding cake, which was a small feature of advertising the play, was banned?
So at a previous Mayor's Question Time, Chair, TfL was criticised for failing to enforce its policies on foods high in fat, sugar and salt, wrongly, by the way, because it was council bus stops, not TfL bus stops. So now TfL's been criticised for enforcing its policy. What brands are supposed to do, and what most brands do, is confirm their advertising complies before they print their posters. It's stipulated by TfL's media partners in booking confirmation. If this particular theatre decided to print the adverts before they'd got confirmation, that's clearly an issue for them as the client. TfL's quite clear in relation to its policies, and everyone else for the last few years appears to be following that. I'm obviously sorry for any finances lost by this theatre company. I'd suggest they speak to the company they used to make sure next time they get compliance confirmed before printing posters.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It just seems strange to me, and I'm sure you'd agree, that on my way here, I at Royal Victoria saw an advert for a Subway sandwich. Other sandwich providers are available. Past Lola's cupcakes in the station, other cake providers are available. And yet a theatre play is being attacked. Now, I've been on the tube often feeling peckish. I've never felt like I would like to devour a wedding cake. I've never seen an advert and thought, actually, I think I'll stop off and buy myself a wedding cake. Do you not see that this seems totally bizarre and against the principles of trying to promote culture in London?
Well, no theatre play is being attacked. In fact, I've been criticised by members on her side for promoting culture in our city. The good news is, notwithstanding that, London is back. Theatres are busy, live music is busy, tourists are back. TfL's policy has been well known for some years now, and I think the Assembly member and her team deserve credit for getting even more publicity for TfL's advertising policy by their criticism. The evidence is also clear that the policy works in relation to reducing the number of children. I appreciate that members got far more discipline than children and control than children, but also won't pressurise her parents to buy foods that are high in fats.
Yes, my children often ask me to stop off and buy them a wedding cake. It's difficult.
But the point is that, you know, the member today criticises TfL for enforcing its policy. At a previous MQT, she criticised TfL for not enforcing its policy, wrongly, by the way. And so the key thing is that TfL will enforce its policy without fear or favour.
I'm disappointed that you can't see where this is going wrong, and I'm disappointed you're comparing false comparatives to me, pointing out that there's still chocolates, burgers and Subway sandwiches across the TfL network, whilst a West End production can spend £20,000 on advertising a play and have that pulled. That's a false comparison, Mr. Mayor, and what you're looking at. I think, and to come on to the childhood obesity statistics that you talk about, right now in London, 47% of children are overweight, obese or severely obese. Are you truly saying to me that without the TfL junk food ad ban, that you believe that figure would be higher than 47%?
Chair, I'm more than happy to send her the report from the Child Obesity Task Force, which talks about a number of issues that need to happen to address the issue of child obesity. There's no one silver bullet. I'm very proud, for example, that we've got more and more schools that are water-only schools. I'm really proud, for example, that we've got school super zones. I'm very proud that from September, every child in primary school age and children will be receiving a free school meal in a state school. All that will help in relation to this issue. The simple ban of foods high in fats, sugar and salts by itself on the TfL estate won't reduce obesity levels that need to be reduced. And so we're doing lots of things across London to address this epidemic of obesity in our young people.
I'll take that as a no to the question then. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask you now about the £16,000 that TfL had to spend on trying to take its own ads off the network. Some of the exchanges were really quite interesting in a FOI by Christopher Snowdon. In an email to the ad agency, TfL's customer marketing and behaviour change, not to be confused with the customer marketing and behaviour change executive, said, just remove the icing sugar and the holly so it's 100% a moon rather than looking like a pudding. He then added, I cannot believe I am writing the above sentence. Is it a concern to you that even within TfL there seems to be some concern about how this is being enacted?
No, there's clarity within TfL. If the issue is the relationship between TfL and the advertising partners, then obviously personnel change. The issue is the product, not the brand. And so if certain items can have less fat, sugar and salt, they can be advertised. And so certain fast food companies that have been referred to in previous MQTs by the member, if they are advertising an item of food that's not high in fat, sugar and salt, they can advertise that. The same goes with zero sugar soft drinks, fries and other products as well. What we don't want to do is encourage particularly children, to pressurise their parents to have foods that are high in fat, sugar and salt. And the two separate peer-reviewed pieces of work done shows that the advertising ban on foods high in fat, sugar and salt has been successful.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And finally, to add on that research that you mentioned, just to finish on that, do you know whether, as part of that research taken out by the London School of, did they actually ask those participating how often they used TfL services?
I'm not sure, Chair, but it was peer-reviewed in
no, the
the
answer's
Public
no. Thanks,
Library
Mr. Mayor.
of Science in February 2022.
And the answer's no, just for your awareness.
And the answer is it was peer-reviewed, Chair.
And the answer is, if you don't know if somebody gets on the train, how are you going to say that they've been affected by what goes on the train?
And as the member will know, peer-reviewed reports are ones that are taken seriously by those in the business of doing reports and academia and science.
I have a degree, a science degree, so thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The next question is in the name of Assembly Member Moema, and it concerns... Sorry? No. Pot. Can we now move on? The next question is in the name of Assembly Member Moema, and it concerns evictions and repossessions.
Thanks for your question. I'm deeply concerned about the impact of high interest rates and spiralling rents on homeowners and private renters in London. Coupled with wider cost of living pressures and below inflation wage growth, we're now seeing a rising risk of eviction or repossession. This year, City Hall is spending over £260 million to directly support Londoners with the cost of living. We're funding free school meals and support for young people to access food during the holidays, tackling fuel poverty through our Warmer Homes programme and energy advice services, and connecting Londoners to welfare advice through our cost of living hub. And on top of that, we're investing £4 million a year in skills provision and £4 billion to 2026 on building more of the genuinely affordable homes Londoners need. I'm also encouraging employers to pay the London Living Wage, including by making a condition of funding for investment partners in my affordable homes programmes. But the government and the banks need to take the lead in protecting homeowners and renters. Last month, I wrote to ministers calling for urgent support for Londoners hit by rising mortgage payments. Londoners need to commit to a 2-year moratorium on repossession to give people breathing space while the economy returns to stability. The government needs to change the support for mortgage interest scheme back to a grant for low-income homeowners and reinstate the mortgage rescue scheme. This will provide expert advice to people facing repossession and support people to stay in their homes if mortgage payments become unaffordable. The affordability crisis in the private rented sector is already leading to extremely troubling homelessness figures, with London councils estimated that 1 child in every London classroom is homeless. Ministers must urgently lift the freeze on local housing allowance rates, realigning them with median local rents, and scrap the benefit cap. The government must make good on their promise to end the use of Section 21 no-fault evictions. It's worrying that despite finally introducing legislation to Parliament, these crucial reforms appear to have stalled. And to support struggling renters, I'm still calling on the government to give me the power to introduce a rent freeze in London.
Thank you, Mayor Khan. And just this morning, there was on the radio, as I was coming in, the London representative of the National Residential Landlords Association talking about how landlords are passing on the cost of their increased mortgages directly to their tenants. So London is seeing anything between Londoners are seeing between 10 to 25, 30% increases in their rents. And so I'm really worried that although we might see Section 21, what we don't have is a closing of the loophole where tenants are not evicted by stealth. Sometimes that is not intentional on the part of the landlords, but that is definitely a concern. So I don't know what you think about whether or not the government has properly considered this in the bill, the preemptive evictions as a result of increasing uncapped rents.
Well, this is just one of the many consequences of Liz Truss's mini-budget last year that we're seeing taking place across London, the misery caused to families. And you're right, there is a concern, particularly when we heard today that the King's speech may take place, which means that the bill that was published recently may not actually pass and become legislation, unless it becomes a bill that's carried over. That there's a loophole, which is that landlords will, before Section 21 is got rid of, and they will then require a reason to evict, are evicting in advance of that loophole of Section 21 being closed. What we're saying to the government is, and Tom Copley's been lobbying the government, is there should be an implementation timescale and a clear message being sent to landlords and tenants about what is acceptable and what isn't. But it is a concern, particularly if the bill that's been published doesn't make progress in September, October, and there is a King's Speech in November, that bill falls unless it's carried over to the next Parliament.
Absolutely, and I'm also particularly concerned that the measures in the bill don't appear yet to be funded, so those duties that will fall to local authorities in our capital. But I just wanted to ask you your views about why you think London is seeing more evictions than any other region in the country.
The short answer is because we have more people living in private rented accommodation. So roughly speaking, 2.7 million Londoners live in private rented accommodation. We have the largest private rental market in the country. I also suspect that more landlords in London have a mortgage that's affecting them, and because of what we've seen in the last year or so with interest rates going through the roof, landlords struggling, that being leading to them making decisions to evict tenants, sell the property because they can't make ends meet. It's a serious issue which we're trying to address. We're also hearing stories about families living in massively overcrowded accommodation because that's the only rent they can afford, particularly if they're receiving benefits as well. We saw during the pandemic the government step up and support families in fear of eviction within the cost of living crisis is as acute for these families in London, and the government should be bringing forward emergency measures again as they did a couple of years ago. So there are no ideological reasons why they can't do so. They've done it before, and that during the pandemic stopped families being evicted, which was a lifesaver literally.
Great, and then my final question, I wanted to move to commercial rents and tenancies, where in this case it's TfL as the landlord. So one of my constituents, Len Maloney, he's part of the East End Trades Guild, and he has had a mechanic business in the Kingsland Arches for a number of years, for a very long time, and he's also provided apprenticeships to local young people and has worked in partnership with the local authority as well as employing local people. And he actually moved when the Haggerston station was upgraded, so he's well embedded in the community. He spoke to me about, and so did the East End Trades Guild, about the way in which TfL have dealt with his tenancy. He has his rent has tripled in the time that he has been a tenant since he first received his first tenancy in 2015, and the offer that he has been made by TfL involves a move from his location after he's already moved to a completely different part of their estate. Now, I would really welcome an opportunity to discuss meaningful ways to support this local business and to consider things like social value and his contribution and others' contribution similar to him. I'm not entirely convinced that the support he received during lockdown from TfL was comparable to others, and I would really think that there is scope to look at a different approach to setting tenancies and to managing those on the part of TfL surveyors. My understanding is that it hasn't really been managed properly by TfL surveyors.
Chair, I don't know the individual case, but I know East End Trades Guild very well, and can I suggest that the Deputy Mayor, Seb Dance, meets with the Assembly member to discuss this case? I'm just nervous to discuss cases publicly because I don't know the details.
Absolutely. I'm not expecting you to discuss the case. It was more a demonstration of the situation that he's in. Sure. But just to say that the levels of notice period that have been given by TfL are very short timescale, so I'd really welcome doing that in the next few weeks.
Yeah. So, I'll take that away, and I know you usually make a note of all the things I promised to do. That's one of the things I promised to do, get the Deputy Mayor to meet with the member to discuss this case and see what progress we can make.
Thank you. Mr. Maloney is an absolute hero locally, Leonard Maloney, in terms of the work he's done. I've known him for a few years, and he's been treated shockingly by TfL. You better take that off my time. And the next question is in the name of Assembly Member McCartney concerning the local housing allowance.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your question. No, the current level of local housing allowance clearly does not work for Londoners. LHA rates have been frozen at 2020 levels, are out of touch with London's rental market in 2023. While support has been frozen, rents have continued to rise, increasing by 16% in 2022 alone, leaving many Londoners in real difficulty. Recent research by the London School of Economics and Savills found that the proportion of new homes listed at an LHA rate has fallen to 2% in London, lower than pre-pandemic levels and lower than the 5% seen elsewhere in the country. The same research found frozen LHA rates to be one driver of the 41% reduction in lettings since 2017. Low-income renters are finding it increasingly difficult to find a home they can afford in our city. I heard stark examples of the effect this is having on renters at my private renters cost of living summit. The impact is also shown in GLA polling, which found that 40% of Londoners feared they would struggle to pay their rent in 2023. Despite government inaction on this issue, I'm supporting Londoners during the cost of living crisis through our Cost of Living Hub, our Warmer Homes programme and our Universal Free School Meals initiative. Ultimately, the best way to fix the housing crisis is to build more affordable homes. I've broken records on that front, meeting the target of starting 116,000 homes under the 2016-2023 Affordable Homes programme, including starting over 20,000 new council homes. But the government must act urgently to increase LHA rates to median market rents. They must also scrap the benefit cap. Not doing so would mean that many of the most vulnerable Londoners would fail to benefit, even if the government did increase LHA rates. I also want to get rents in London under control. The government must give me the power to introduce an emergency 2-year rent freeze in London and devolve the power to implement rent controls as set out in my blueprint for reforming private renting in London.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the effect of not increasing the local housing allowance has real human cost. I mean, I know of families who have been evicted through no fault of their own and have been sent, for example, from North London to Croydon. I know of one family where there are 2 children in exam years and they're looking at a 3-hour journey every day just to attend school, and local authorities are really struggling to find properties in which they can place local people. And this means that our most financially vulnerable Londoners are scrabbling for often what is the poorest quality housing stock. Has the GLA done any calculation on what uplift is needed to remedy this and actually change the situation?
Yeah. Chair, can I just say a number of colleagues' microphones are, there is an issue.
We are aware that there is. I think we got what you said.
I heard the question, but people may not have heard it. But I currently have the same problem. Yeah.
There is an issue that we're aware of. And it's related to Wi-Fi for the internet, but we are attending to it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question. So we have looked into this issue. We are concerned at the number of Londoners who rely on LHA to cover their housing costs who are struggling because there are fewer properties where the rent can be fully covered by the level set on the LHA. A number I saw was the number of properties available has gone from 23% to 5%, which means a number of things. Like I said in answer to a question from Sem Moima, that a number of families are living in overcrowded accommodation because it's cheaper rent rather than staying in a property the size of your family. You gave another example, people living further away from when their community ties are because it's the only property they can afford, children travelling 3 hours to and from school when they should be revising and so forth. And that's one of the reasons why the government needs to step up and just increase to the median level of 50% will make a transformative difference to these families.
And can I ask, what specific actions have you taken, perhaps making representations to government or working with London councils?
So we're working in partnership with London councils. I've personally written to the Treasury. The Deputy Mayor co-signed the letter with Shelter and others on this issue. Meeting with Michael Gove is being asked for, but in the meantime, the Deputy Mayor and my London Housing Panel have written to Michael Gove on this issue. And so we are concerned about this. We're also working with colleagues in relation to capital letters and setting the standard about transfers and so forth for those who are struggling. The bad news is things are getting worse, not better. So unless the government steps up, I'm afraid you'll have more constituents approaching you with consequences of this policy.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Just being updated on this Wi-Fi issue. The next question is also from Assembly Member McCartney, if I'm right, and that concerns Thames Water.
Thank you, Chair. I've been concerned about Thames Water's performance since I became Mayor. I've repeatedly called on them to up their game following numerous burst mains incidents causing localised flooding and outages across the capital, as well as ongoing sewage spills and contamination issues in London's rivers. I've also raised these matters with Ofwat, having met the Chair twice in the last year. I want to be clear, Londoners should not be paying the price for Thames Water's poor performance. Thames is owned by pension funds and sovereign wealth investors. The biggest single shareholder is the Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement Scheme, which holds around 32% of the shares. Another pension fund, the UK-based University Superannuation Scheme, holds another 20%. Last summer, investors agreed to provide an extra £500 million of equity to the business, and they've recently announced a further £750 million to repair its finances, although this is short of the £1 billion expected. We expect three very basic things from London's water companies. First, that they provide clean water to our homes, our public spaces and businesses at a reasonable cost. Second, that supply is maintained and leaks are dealt with through investment in pipes and reservoirs. And third, that they protect the environment and the rivers they rely on for supply. Thames Water has all too often failed on all three fronts. Regulation has been weak, allowing unacceptable performance and below-par service levels for Thames Water customers for years. There's been a long-term lack of investment in London's water infrastructure, and the regulator must assume some responsibility for this, and critically must have focus on supporting a turnaround in performance. Thames Water is now on its third turnaround plan since 2017. We need urgent clarity about how the company plans to turn things around, and more detail on the new targeted approach to focus on a smaller number of initiatives over the next 3 years that they announced in their annual performance reports. Whatever the outcome, I welcome the assurances I've been given by Ofwat that Thames Water customers will continue to receive an uninterrupted water supply in London, no matter what happens to the business.
Thank you. I think it's actually quite scandalous how Thames Water and other water companies have behaved, and I think the failure of privatisation, I think, is quite clear by your statement that you're having to seek assurances about a quality of a water supply being maintained. But can I ask, we heard recently at the Environment Committee that actually there is no clean river in London at all that meets the necessary environmental regulations. So it is a failure of both Thames Water, but as you said, the regulator. Have you made representations about increasing regulation? Because that's certainly what's needed.
And just the point about privatisation, when Thames Water was privatised, there was zero debt.
Yeah.
There's now £14 billion worth of debt. And we've seen previous owners take money out of Thames Water, build up debt, and it's been scandalous, your words, which I echo. So yeah, it's been raised with Ofwat by myself, by the Deputy Mayor. We've raised it with Thames Water as well. You've seen, I think the day after Thames Water gave evidence to the GLA Environment Committee there before a select committee in the House of Commons, it was raised there as well, the issue of not one of our rivers being at the standards we expect it to be. I think that the basic point that Thames will get across is this is not a issue of it being a private commodity. It's about them taking an interest in the wider ecosystem, and they need to understand their responsibilities to the wider ecosystem.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just to update Assembly members, we are aware of the issues with the Wi-Fi. This is something that's going to be looked at. I mean, we're trying to fix it now, but a more permanent solution is going to be looked at over the summer break. Sorry? Well, it's well timed then, wasn't it, to illustrate the problem. So, Assembly Member Desai. Oh, right. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry. I thought it was coming in on that point. We now move on to the next question, which concerns crime rates from Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the question. Tackling crime and keeping Londoners safe is my top priority. I'm determined to continue leading from the front in London by being tough on crime and tackling its complex causes. In 2022, the number of homicides in London fell to its lowest since 2014, and teenage homicides reduced by more than 50%. Comparing pre-pandemic crime data to May 2023 data, burglary is down by 31%, robbery down by 25%, vehicle offences are down by 17%, knife-enabled crime is down by 14%, gun crime is down by 26%, homicide down by 27%. Although crime rates are still below pre-pandemic levels, certain recorded crime types have increased beyond pre-pandemic levels. For example, recorded sexual offences and domestic abuse cases have risen, partly owing to improvements in police recording practices. I provided record investment to restore neighbourhood policing in the capital, with 1,300 additional officers funded to patrol our streets and town centres from City Hall. I've also recently announced funding for 500 additional police community support officers to work in neighbourhoods disproportionately impacted by crime. As a result, police officer numbers have reached the highest levels in MPS history during my time as Mayor, with 34,400 officers as of June 2023. I've published my Violence Against Women and Girls strategy and overseen the investment of over £100 million to tackle these crimes in London. I've funded communications campaigns to help shift social attitudes on violence against women and girls, including the Have a Word campaign and a grassroots campaign to tackle and prevent FGM. And I've invested £1 million in an education toolkit available to every secondary school in London to help recognise and tackle sexist and misogynistic behaviour. The MPS published earlier this week its new Met for London plan. This sets out, among other reform priorities, how neighbourhood policing will be strengthened, including by working more closely with communities and partners to address their local concerns. This will be a vital aspect of improving the confidence our communities have in their police, and therefore restoring the principle of policing by consent. Officials are working at pace to deliver Baroness Casey's recommendation to create a new London Policing Board. I'll chair this and publicly oversee and scrutinise MPS delivery of its new plan and the police and crime plan to ensure we maintain a relentless focus on reducing crime and improving trust and confidence amongst London's diverse communities.
Thank you. We certainly do need to improve trust and confidence. It's never been worse, Mr. Mayor. But crime has been increasing in London, and it's reached over 1 million in the year ending June 2023. That's £1 million of recorded, 1 million recorded crimes. Do you think, therefore, a different approach is required?
I think the Commissioner set out this week the different approach in his new plan for London, with communities being at the centre of the police's response, the police addressing the issues of cultural issues in the police service, but also getting core policing right in relation to equipment and estate as well. The new Met plan for London was well received by communities, which is very important, but also has cross-party support as well. And my job is to both support the Commissioner in his new plan, but also to challenge and scrutinise him as well.
Clearly, you can't be happy with over 1 million recorded crimes in a year.
Chair, one crime is one too many, and we've got to make sure we double down. One of the reasons I've written to the Prime Minister today is the evidence from previous years in relation to what happens in summer, particularly when there's increased deprivation, poverty and lack of opportunities. Councils across London are crying out to have more funding to provide facilities for young people. And one of the reasons why I wrote to the Prime Minister was my concern that we could see an increase in crime this summer as we are seeing the devastating consequences of the cost of living crisis.
Yes, we must remember, though, that you are the Police and Crime Commissioner, so you can write to lots of different people, but actually you are responsible. So if crimes are increasing, why are the number of arrests falling? They're down 16% in the year ending June 2023 compared to 2020.
The reason why it's important to write to the Prime Minister is we've been successful in the past. When I was lobbying the government in the first 4 years of my mayoralty about more resources, I was told, why are you wasting your time? Lo and behold, the government did decide to invest in more policing in London. Not enough, but still they invested in more police in London. So the lobbying does pay off in some regard. In relation to arrests, we have seen more arrests in certain offences. So, for example, there's been more than 500 cases of additional rape and serious sexual offences in the last 12 months. One of the reasons why this new Commissioner is making sure police officers go to nearly every residential burglary is to make sure they can get better evidence to arrest more people in relation to burglary, which has led to, by the way, burglary going down by more than 6.3% over the last 12 months, but clearly more to be done. One of the reasons why we're saying to the government we need more support, because we're 1,500 officers light, is because the more police officers we have, the more arrests they can make.
Yes, your funding has gone up considerably. We've got more frontline officers than we've ever had before, and yet we've reached £1 million of recorded crimes in the past year, and the solve rate, if you like, is going down and down. And this is why trust and confidence in the police is at an all-time low. And you keep writing to lots of other people, but you must remember you are the Police and Crime Commissioner. You have to start taking some responsibility.
Which, that's not right, is it? Because we've had £1 billion worth of cuts from the government since 2010, £1 billion cut from the government. London's population has gone up over the last 14 years. The per capita police officer per 1,000 population used to be 4.1 in 2010. It's now 3.7. And the reason why it's as high as 3.7 is not because of the government's investment, it's because of City Hall's investment, £1.1 billion from City Hall, paying for 1,300 additional police officers, and this year 500 police community support officers. So the Met Police are working incredibly hard, but it's one hand tied behind its back because of government cuts.
Well, if you're saying you've put so much money into it, then clearly that's not the answer, is it? Because we've reached over 1 million recorded crimes in the last year, and sanction detection rates, or solve rates as the public would know them, are going down and down. I say to you again, you should start taking responsibility. You're the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Well, Chair, the other figures I can give to the member to show the progress the police are making despite government cuts is in relation to what we've seen in recent months. Residential burglary down by 6.3% in the last 12 months. Calls from the public are being answered faster. More than 500 cases of rape and serious sexual offences charged in the last 12 months. The most dangerous men are being targeted. The backlog of online child abuse cases has been cleared, and there's around 18% fewer calls for antisocial behaviour. No complacency at all from the Commissioner or myself. The sooner we can get support from the government, we can make more progress. The Commissioner announced this week 500 more officers doing public protection work, and he was quite clear in relation to when he did media this week, some of the consequences of austerity over the last 14 years, which we're trying to ameliorate and address, partly with support from City Hall, hopefully with support from the government as well.
Yes, you're very selective sometimes on the figures you give. So if you look at the dashboard, the Met dashboard itself, you'll see that robbery is up 20.4%, theft from a person is up 24.8%, knife crime is up 20.3%, gun crime is up 18.6%, and theft or taking a motor vehicle is up 10.3%. I say to you again, are you ever going to take any responsibility? You've been here 7 years and things are getting worse. And I repeat, we've reached over 1 million recorded crimes in the last year. Do you think that's good enough?
So when you compare, Chair, the crime before the pandemic with crime now, burglary down, robbery down, vehicle offence is down, knife-enabled crime down, gun crime down, homicide down. No complacency. We're going to make more progress, which is why I support the new Commissioner's new plan for London. I make this point. I wasn't the person who gave unequivocal support for the last Commissioner. I was the Police and Crime Commissioner who was quite clear in my lack of confidence in her. This new Commissioner is brought forward a new plan. I welcome Dame Louise Casey's report again, not welcomed by some in this Assembly, welcomed by me. We're making progress in relation to this, but clearly more to be done. Integral to that is winning back trust and confidence of London's diverse communities. I think diversity is a strength, by the way, not a weakness. And so you'll see in the plan this week published real concrete steps to win back that trust and confidence from London's Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities, London's women and girls, and also those from the LGBTQ plus community as well.
I don't remember anybody in this Assembly who thought anything but well of the Casey report, the way it was written. But as always, you just throw blame at everybody else. Do you think Londoners are at a high risk of crime?
Well, Chair, I'm concerned about crime going up this summer, which is why I've written to the Prime Minister today. We've got a situation where we've got the cost of living crisis getting worse each week. situation where councils are crying out for more support in relation to providing facilities for young people to get busy, tough on the causes of crime, but also then facing 14 years of cuts in their budgets, losing almost half of their budget. From City Hall, we're providing record activities through the VRU
You're
to young
repeating
people
this a little bit parrot fashion now.
but we need support from the government as well. And so I've written to the Prime Minister today, and I'm happy to publish the letter if colleagues want to see the concerns I've raised with the Prime Minister.
Right, shall we try again? Do you think Londoners are at a high risk of crime? It could be a yes or no question, see how good you are at those.
Yeah, we saw how Moz was in relation to yes and no.
I was
questions.
excellent, so you try.
I congratulate you on being
Thank
the
you.
Conservative nominee for the mayoral contest. Again, I'm concerned in relation to this summer, which is why I've written to the Prime Minister. And the issue is whether the Prime Minister shares my concern and will give us the support that we need in London. If he doesn't give us the support we need, then we know where responsibility lies if crime does go up this summer.
Well, after 7 years, I really wish you would start taking responsibility yourself for being the Police and Crime Commissioner. But I see you're keeping my seat nice and warm there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next question is from... Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, Assembly Member Desai.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I was going to ask you about what measures you're taking to prevent youth violence across London this summer. But what you said in your opening statement and your letter to the Prime Minister has addressed my concerns. But instead, can I raise the issue of Notting Hill Carnival, which will soon be upon us, and the policing of Carnival? Presumably, police plans are well advanced to ensure that all Londoners enjoy a safe, secure, and a friendly carnival.
Yeah, look, some members of the Assembly are anti-Black Lives Matter. I'm quite clear Black Lives Matter, and the celebration of our black communities at Notting Hill Carnival is one I really enjoy every year. And so working closely with the police to make sure we've got the right response, working closely with the councils, the community, to make sure Carnival is as successful as it can be. We do know in the past there have been issues around criminality at the Carnival. We're working with the company that provides the stewarding, working closely with the community groups that help organise the Carnival to make sure Carnival can be as successful as it can be. You know, it's because I believe diversity is a strength, not a weakness, that I support the Carnival wholeheartedly. And it's very important that we work with the community to make sure the Carnival is again a success this year, which us demonstrating a celebration of London's black community.
Thank you for your strong support of Carnival. I mean, I first attended Carnival in the late 70s. It's changed over the years. I would say it's now a mainstream London, well, international event, in fact, and even for all Londoners. Clearly, there are issues around safety, but I think the Metropolitan Police operations, which I've observed at close range over the last 7 years, I've been to the police control room on the Saturday of Carnival weekend. It's a very impressive operation, and I'd like to pay tribute to the way the police actually approach Carnival. So I think I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Thank you. Assembly Member Garrett will now ask a question about Solar Together.
Thanks for your question. I launched Solar Together London in 2018 to help Londoners take up rooftop solar. Across 5 phases of the programme, thousands of households have had rooftop solar installed, a total of around 7 megawatts. I'm angry that some Londoners have received a totally unacceptable level of service by Green Energy Together, known as GET. GET has let down people throughout the country, including in Warwickshire and Cambridgeshire, and of course in London, and it's totally unacceptable. The GLA does not have a direct contract with GET. The company I choose was contracted to select assured installation companies and entered into an agreement with GET amongst other installation companies. Local authorities around the country have contracted iChooser for their work, including Suffolk, Surrey, Cambridgeshire, Kent and Essex. Now that GET has gone into administration, we're working to ensure iChooser fulfills its responsibilities and ensure Londoners get back every penny they're owed. My Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy and senior GLA officers have met the CEO of iChooser on several occasions to raise our deep concerns about the numerous complaints and unreturned deposits. While the GLA is not the owner of the customer data, my team is now meeting daily with iChooser to ensure progress is being made. To date, over 3,000 Londoners have exited the programme either because they've had their installation completed or because they've received a refund. We're pushing iChooser to put in place a process to support those customers who are waiting to have their installation completed and accredited. We're ensuring that the remaining customers are supported to get their refunds or transfer over to another installer. So far, to date, 29 customers who have transferred from Get to other Phase 5 installers have had completed installations. In the longer term, we do need to take stock and learn lessons. If we want to see this sector grow, we're going to need more stronger regulation and consumer protection measures introduced at a national level. Londoners have done the right thing by wanting to move early in the green transition, and we're ahead of the rest of the country. But in being pioneering, we've run into a market that makes it too easy for customers to experience poor service. I'm sorry that so many Londoners have had a poor experience, and I'm determined to ensure that lessons are learned locally and nationally to avoid this kind of situation in the future.
I'm pleased to hear you say that you're sorry for those people who've had problems, many of them. And although it has gone badly wrong, I think Solar Together had the laudable aim of helping Londoners fit solar panels on their homes. You spent £1 million roughly advertising it. I'm interested in what you said just now in your answer about GLA doesn't have responsibility for the installer, because on your website during the period when people were signing up, it reassured people that, and I'm quoting here from the website, it said, the Solar Together London scheme will group purchase solar panels at a very competitive price on your behalf and oversee the high quality installation of them by installers who have passed our rigorous vetting process. That would have reassured people. It was on your website, had your branding on. It wasn't true, was it?
Well, my understanding is that the marketing cost is £600,000, not £1 million. But also that wasn't on the GLA website, it was on the Solar Together, the iChooser website, not on the GLA.
It was not. It was on the london.gov.uk website with Mayor of London branding at the top of it. That was there in January. I looked at it myself. I took a screenshot and I took the text, which I've just read out to you.
Yeah, it was a link to the Solar Together London website, not the GLA
It was
website.
not a link to it was the london.gov.uk website. I went to it myself. I took a screenshot of it, and the text on it is the text that I just read out to you, talking about overseeing high-quality installation by installers who have passed our rigorous vetting process. Right. That was not accurate, was it?
Well, I've read the transcript of the session where the same question was put to the Deputy Chief of Staff and others.
Okay, well then you will have seen in that transcript the part where one of your officers admitted that those words have now been removed. Is she wrong to admit that?
And their answer is my answer, which is a Solar Together London website. But I'm quite clear. There are lessons that need to be...
okay, look, you're going to change the subject. Those words were on your website. Your senior officer who oversees this project admitted at the Environment Committee that they were removed. They shouldn't have ever been on there, were they? Because it wasn't true. Well,
my understanding is it was on a Solar Together London page of the website. And my understanding is also that the subcontractor employed by iChooser...
So you're now saying it was on the Solar Together bit of the website? You're admitting it was on your website?
It was on the Solar Together London website, the iChooser page of the website. It was not on the GLA
of which website?
The Solar Together London page of the website.
The website? Your website?
There was a link from the GLA to the Solar Together London page. I'm more than happy for the officer to write again to the member. She did give evidence, as did others.
So are you denying that those words were ever on the london.gov.uk website?
What I'm doing is repeating what was said at the...
You're repeating an evasive answer that doesn't answer the question. Those words, if somebody came to your website, having seen your publicity, thinking, this sounds like an interesting scheme, I'd like to get involved in this, those words were on the london.gov.uk website with Mayor of London at the top of it. Are you denying that that's true?
No, Joe, what I'm saying is that what I've seen is the transcript of the session before the Environment Committee, where the very same questions were put. And I'm relaying to the member the same answers given by the members on that committee. I didn't visit the website myself. I'm quite clear, though, that lessons need to be learned. If it is the case, there were mistakes made on the Solar Together London website, the iChooser page. I'm more than happy for officers to learn those lessons.
Okay, well, I think I'll end my questioning there. This feels like another one of those sessions where we ask if he knows anything about the ULEZ consultation results, and we later find out by FOI that he knew weeks earlier and then denied it to our faces. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question is from Assembly Member Baker concerning railway ticket offices.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the question. The changes recently announced for consultation by the Rail Delivery Group for the National Rail Network would see many ticket offices close. This will not apply to TfL stations, but it will of course affect Londoners, many of whom rely on national rail stations to get into and around London. Many Londoners will be concerned about this, and I'm concerned it could impact Londoners' ability to get around the capital. I'd encourage Londoners to respond to the consultation via the London Travel Watch website. The consultation is open until the 26th of July. In undertaking any changes, the rail delivery group should put customers at the heart of their decision-making process, making sure staff are there to provide travel advice, help customers buy tickets, and offer help to those who need it to get on and off trains. This is particularly important for disabled customers. I'm, of course, responsible only for TfL's network. This includes the Underground, Overground, Elizabeth Line, DLR, London's buses and trams. Every Underground, Overground and Elizabeth Line station is staffed from first to last train, and every DLR service has a staff member on board to assist customers. Ticketing needs to be easy to understand and use. 20 years ago, Oyster changed the way customers pay for travel, and a decade ago, TfL led the world by developing contactless pay-as-you-go on public transport. On behalf of the DfT and the RDG, TfL will be rolling out contactless pay-as-you-go across 53 rail stations in the southeast later this year. TfL will continue to support the expansion of pay-as-you-go, and I hope it can be expanded to even more stations in the coming years. When Londoners travel through TfL-managed stations, they can expect staff to be there to support them. TfL also serves some stations managed by train operating companies, for example Barking and Tottenham Hale. Londoners will continue to need support at these busy stations. To be clear, RDG's recently announced plans do not impact any stations managed by TfL, and there are no current plans to close ticket offices on stations managed by its Elizabeth Line or London Overground services.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for that comprehensive answer. We talked a couple of weeks ago, just after the consultation had opened, about the impact on disabled passengers. Obviously, as you've said, many Londoners rely on National Rail to get around and also to get on and off to TfL services. The picture is still as concerning as it was then, and I'd like to specifically raise the issue of equality impact assessments, which is obviously a crucial tool for members of the public to understand what the actual impact of changes is going to be. Only one train operator has published an equality impact assessment for their consultation, and today I've written to the Secretary of State for Transport calling on him to require every operator to conduct and publish an equality impact assessment and restart the consultation, because it's simply impossible for a lot of people and a lot of groups who represent disabled people and other passenger groups to understand the impact. Will you support this call?
I do, and I'm sure you'll have cross-party support for this, particularly from the Conservatives, who are very keen on equality impact assessments when it comes to mayoral policies, less keen when it comes to government policies, but it's really important. You know the importance of staff being there as a help point in relation to commuters, but also when it's a turn up and go service, you want to be turn up and go, and if you need to have in advance staff present, it causes all sorts of challenges and stuff. So I'm concerned, and I'm more than happy to join any campaign that you have on this, or even better if it's cross-party.
Thank you. Yes, I absolutely agree. I'd also like to the specific issue of buying tickets. Secretary of State has said that only that 90% of tickets are bought, National Rail tickets are bought online and by ticket machine, which obviously means 10% aren't, and that's a huge number of journeys, huge number of people who are using ticket offices, and there doesn't seem to be any understanding of why those people are doing it. And ticket vending machines come with a host of barriers that make them inaccessible to many people: lack of tactile information and functionality, poorly signposted, out of reach for wheelchair users, and a lot of complexity of information and user experience. Surely this decision will stop many Londoners from finding it easy to travel.
I could understand if the intention was to have staff still around, but not necessarily in a booth. The problem is we've heard stories about staff being served redundancy notices, which is why people are suspicious, particularly the sort of communities you're talking about who need that support, whether it's to buy a ticket, maybe visually impaired, English not first language, tactile issues and so forth, or other reasons they want support from a member of staff, give confidence, help down stairs, getting the ramp ready at various points in a station and by the train. So I think this clarity is required from the RDGs and the government about what it is exactly they're seeking to do. Having a very short consultation period doesn't help and makes people suspicious. The lack of, on top of that, the quality impact assessment is one of the reasons why I'm sure you've been approached and inundated by commuters from all across London and even, dare I say, outside London as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much.
Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Something that definitely has got a negative effect on Londoners' ability to access the transport network is the vast number of strikes that Londoners have suffered under your mayoralty. You described 35 strikes under Boris as a disgrace, and yet, let me see how many, yes, and yet when you became mayor, you've had 135 strikes under you. Given you promised 0 days of strike, and given that you've opposed every government measure to reduce strikes on public transport, what are your plans to stop the RMT's repeated attempts to hold London to ransom?
We know the RMT are on strike to national networks, and over the course of the weekend before the pandemic, the number of strikes in London had reduced by more than 70%. Because we respect our workers and trade unions and we negotiate with them. At the same time, we reduce deficits by more than £1 billion of TfL, reduce operating costs, cut the amount of non-permanent labour by working with our trade unions. The only reason, you mentioned RMT, but ASLEF as well, are intending to strike next week is because of a condition imposed by the government in relation to pensions that doesn't save any money, but is a red rag to a bull, because the impression that the workers have, the members have, is the government intends to make unilateral changes to their pension. The good news is RMT ASLEF are talking to TfL at ACAS. There's been 2 days of talk. A further day of talk is taking place tomorrow. I'd encourage RMT ASLEF, TfL to resolve this amicably tomorrow. That's the way to resolve these issues, not by making threats to consultants, as the Health Secretary did today, or to transport workers, as the Transport Secretary regularly does, is by talking and resolving these things.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, as I said, you said that 35 was a disgrace when it was Boris Johnson, and yet it's 135, due to be far more after next week, under you. But, of course, again, it's somebody else's fault, isn't it? That's what you always say. And yet you promised 0 strikes.
Let me be clear. The actions of the government are a disgrace in relation to creating conditions where these strikes have to take place, whether it's teachers, whether it's doctors, whether it's consultants, whether it's transport workers. These strikes shouldn't be happening. We've got a cost of living crisis. Inflation's going up and up and up because of the Liz Truss mini budget. People's wages aren't keeping up with inflation. Many of these workers haven't had a pay rise commensurate with inflation for the last 13, 14 years. It is a disgrace. Austerity was a government choice, and these are the consequences of that austerity.
I think it's a disgrace that you never take the blame for anything, Mr. May. You promised 0 strikes, which I think was a ridiculous thing to promise, but nevertheless you did, and some people actually thought you meant that. But I'll leave that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question is in the name of Assembly Member Devonish, and it concerns disingenuous promises.
Thank you, Chair. I was elected as Mayor of London to be a champion for London and Londoners. I make no apologies for using the bully pulpit of City Hall to do just that. I pride myself in being a mayor who talks up London at every opportunity, whether that's by celebrating the incredible success of our culture and arts sector, our booming businesses, or our rich diversity. I'm also determined to do all I can from City Hall to make this city safer, greener, fairer, and more prosperous. Through the hard work of our teams here at the GLA, we've done exactly that. Through the rollout of our pioneering free school meals and holiday meals programmes, starting record numbers of genuinely affordable and council homes, the creation of England's first violence reduction unit, policies that have cut air pollution in central London by nearly half, and many other achievements besides. Despite these successes, there's always more I want to achieve for Londoners. The government has budgets that dwarf the GLA's and levers we simply do not possess. It is only right, therefore, that the Mayor of London advocates on behalf of Londoners to the government for those policies that will benefit our city. I was elected twice on a platform that contained commitments to lobby and advocate for policies that the government did not at the time agree with. These policies range from the devolution of powers to introduce rent controls to the banning of the annual Defence and Security Equipment International Fair. Though Prime Ministers and individual ministers may change, the needs of the people of London has remained a constant guiding principle in the policies I seek to adopt. Of course, we work with the government constantly to deliver on a whole range of programmes too. On the affordable housing programme, we started 116,000 new affordable homes using money devolved to us by the government, hitting a target set by the government and providing the homes Londoners need. Some of our biggest achievements have been the result of the devolution of powers. For example, our provision of free skills training for all Londoners who are unemployed or in low-paid work, which was made possible by the devolution of the adult education budget in 2019. The devolved powers we do have would not have been won if it wasn't for lobbying and advocacy of London politicians, businesses and trade unions as well as others. Londoners expect their mayor to stand up for them and policies that will make their lives better. I've done this throughout my time in office and will continue to do so.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Mayor. So do you expect the next government, Conservative or Labour, to agree to rent controls?
I'll continue to lobby this government and the next one to devolve to us the powers to have rent controls. In the meantime, I think a rent freeze is incredibly important. Assembly Member Moema and McCartney explained the consequences of rents being out of control, and I think rent freezes as a precursor to us having the power to have rent controls by the Commission being set up would really help Londoners.
Do you think the next government, whether it's Conservative or Labour, will agree to decriminalise drugs?
That's not my view. My view is to have a commission look at the evidence. I believe evidence is really important. Let's wait and see what the Commission comes back with, and we can then have a conversation. What I don't want to do is advocate for policies without the evidence, whether it's universal basic income, which Zach and I spoke about earlier on, or whether it's on the issue of decriminalisation of cannabis. The purpose of the Commission is for them to go away, speak to experts, speak to people across the criminal justice sector, health sector, communities, young people and so forth, come forward with a piece of work which we will look at, and if it recommends, big if it recommends a change in law, we'll have the evidence base to try and persuade the government, whatever colour the government is, to change the law if that's what the report recommends, and I agree with that.
And do you think the next government, Labour or Conservative, will agree to Mr. Zach Polanski's policy on universal credit?
Well, I think...
Basic income, sorry.
I wasn't sure which one you meant.
Apologies.
And so, in relation to universal basic income, I think what Mr. Polanski, apologies for talking about him like he's not here, is talking about is trying something new. He's saying, look, we've got a situation where too many people in our city and our country are in poverty. As brilliant as the welfare state is, despite 14 years of attack from the Tory government, it's not working for everyone. Are there new things we should be trying? My response is, that's very interesting. Why don't we try and do a pilot to see what the evidence is? And, if it doesn't work, that's fine. At least we tried it. If it does work, let's talk about scaling it up. I don't think we should be scared of new ideas. I know this is not criticism of you personally, but Conservatives believe in conserving and everything staying the same. As a progressive, I try to see what new things we can do to make the world a better place, to make London a better place, to make our citizens who are struggling struggle less and flourish and thrive. That's what progressives do, and that means exploring new ways of doing things, whether it's exploring rent controls, whether it's exploring whether the current laws on drugs work, whether it's exploring universal basic income.
Don't you think it's really just student politics when you really should be focused on things that you can do with this government or a future government? Unless we have a Green Party government, which I'm sure you're not predicting, virtually nothing that you actually want is going to happen.
If I was being criticised, for example, for buying water cannons I can't use because the government's not licensed it and spending taxpayers' money, I could accept that criticism as schoolboy politics. If I was suggesting and spending millions of pounds on looking into a Thames estuary airport, even appointing a deputy mayor for that, even though the government was against it, when the government's of my party, that'd be schoolboy politics and playing
7 years, Mr. Mayor.
If I promised,
7 years.
If I promised,
I know you're obsessed with a certain previous mayor, but he's gone.
You're
here.
If I was promising putting my body before a bulldozer and then flying to Afghanistan on taxpayers' money, that'd be schoolboy politics. I'm doing none of those things. I'm saying, listen, in the world's greatest city, we should be looking at new things to ensure all Londoners can fulfil the London promise. Work hard, get it help in hand, and you can achieve anything. And, for the next 5 years in this chair, I intend to do that.
Well, I'll leave it there, but I'm sure that the candidate today in a certain by-election doesn't support any of your policies either. Thank you.
That looks like that seems like a good time for a natural
Can't be in
break.
faith.
So let's adjourn for 10. Let's
Although we
adjourn
agree
for
on a
10
lot,
minutes.
to be fair.
All right, 10 minutes.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yep, all right.
Isn't it? The next question is in the name of, well, it will be asked by Assembly Member Sheikh, and it concerns emerging fire hazards in London.
Thank you. Chair, can I just check? We've skipped over the question before from fine, sorry, beg your pardon, that's fine.
I beg your pardon. Yes, I should have said that question has been withdrawn.
Thank you. Thank you for stepping in. The tragic death of Sophia Duarte on New Year's Day in Sadiq and the incident in Cambridge on 30th of June, in which a woman and 2 children tragically lost their lives following a fire caused by an e-bike, are stark reminders of the importance of fire safety. So far this year, the London Fire Brigade has attended an e-bike or e-scooter fire once every 2 days. In this challenging context, the brigade is doing everything it can to keep Londoners safe. In March, the brigade launched its Charge Safe campaign to promote safety messaging to Londoners on how to safely charge and store their e-bikes and e-scooters. But the brigade is limited in what it can do to prevent people from purchasing unsafe products in the first place. To reduce these types of fires, we urgently need government regulation to provide clear national product standards and accountability for those selling poor quality products. The brigade has identified DIY conversion kits as a particular area of concern. These kits can be easily purchased on online marketplaces and typically add a battery to a regular bicycle to convert it to an e-bike. There is currently limited scope to hold the sellers of these products to account. Online marketplaces that enable these products to be sold are not regulated in the same way as shops on the high street. To close this loophole, the government must bring forward the product safety review being led by the Office for Product Safety and Standards, the OPSS. The government concluded its consultation on this review over 2 years ago, but we're still waiting for the final review report itself. The review could ensure safeguards are in place for people unknowingly purchasing dangerous products from online marketplaces. The OPSS should also review standards for e-bikes specifically, including conversion kits and charges to ensure that new products are safe. When properly manufactured, e-bikes and e-scooters provide a cheaper, reliable form of transport that can help to reduce emissions and make London more sustainable. But the risk of devastating fires will only be mitigated once the government intervenes to stop the sale of dangerous products.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and good morning to you. We couldn't agree more. I think you've highlighted some of the dangers that are coming with the increasing sort of DIY kits that are being used for whether it's e-bikes or e-scooters. And actually this year we've seen a 60% rise in fires from e-bikes and e-scooters compared to last year. So, you know, as you've already spoken to, sort of national regulatory framework is urgent now on this. But we also wanted to ask a little bit more about, you know, the conversations that the government have been having around e-scooter trials to ensure that we have safety around the battery that operates those, but more broadly, people's experience of them in the trials so far.
Thanks. I know there's cross-party support for this work. Hina Bakari has raised this issue on previous Mayor's question time as well. So a lot of work has been done in relation to making sure the DFT knows our concerns in relation to this issue. The LFB's Charge Safe campaign on e-scooter fires, consultation with the DFT, we are concerned, the LFB is concerned about the delay in the DFT legislation that was promised. You'll recall the initial pilot for e-scooter hire in London was supposed to have ended, and there should have been legislation by now. That's now been extended, and so we're seeing what more there is to be learned. But in the meantime, we are lobbying the government for legislation based upon the trials we've already had across the country, because the concern with further trials is it means that further regulation is delayed as well, which means the concerns that you've articulated aren't being addressed. We'll carry on doing our bit, but if it is the case there's cross-party support, I think the Assembly also lobbying the DFT, I think would help.
Thank you. Do I sense a joint letter coming on potentially? Looking over to you, to the Liberal Democrats. Well, I'll finish up on my last point, Mr. Mayor, which is just around the emerging risk that was identified by the London Fire Brigade to us at a recent FREP meeting. And the chair of the committee, Assemblymember Clark, was keen to ensure that we kept pushing this agenda, which is around disposable barbecues as an emerging risk, and the conversations with government that you might be having around regulation on this and the sale of them. So if you could elaborate on that, would be great.
Yeah, Anne Clark's been assiduous in relation to these issues for some time now. Look, the London Fire Brigade aren't party poopers. They want everyone to enjoy the good weather and enjoy summer and spending time with family and friends. But it is a fact that disposable barbecues can be the source of fires, and there's a real concern, particularly when there's extreme heat. And there are particular places where you shouldn't be using a disposable barbecue, particularly when there's extreme heat. Open spaces, balconies, obvious places. So we've got a campaign, the LFP's got a campaign to try and encourage chief executives of councils who are responsible for the parks to be do more publicity, park enforcement to do more enforcement, rural parks to do more enforcement. Other things, they're trying to have an education campaign. Be aware when you're throwing away your rubbish, the consequences of that. When you're stubbing out a cigarette, what you do with the cigarette, make sure it's stubbed out properly. Things like not leaving broken bottles and glass, because that magnifies the light and so forth. So because we're not used to these extreme weathers, we're not used to this sort of basic safety, which you get in hot countries. And so the LFB is doing what it can with its limited resources. We're doing what we can to amplify that. But what we need from the government is support towards these campaigns, and if need be, changing legislation. Retailers have been very responsible, but the guidance is voluntary from the BRC, and that is also an area that needs to be looked into.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question is in the name of Assembly Member Fortune and concerns damaged ULEZ cameras.
Thanks for your question. TfL uses a network of automatic number plate recognition cameras, ANPR, to enforce the ULEZ by identifying non-compliant vehicles that enter or drive within the zone. This is a vital part of our work to improve air quality. Vandalising one of these cameras or any other property is criminal damage. Whatever one thinks of the ULEZ policy, I would hope we would all agree that those who steal equipment or willfully cause criminal damage should face the appropriate criminal penalties. TfL reports any instances of criminal damage and theft to the Met Police Service. TfL and the Met Police Service are proactively pursuing the small number of people engaging in this criminal activity, and I fully support the Met Police Service in their investigations. To date, 2 individuals have been charged by the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS, with vandalising ULEZ cameras. TfL works hard to ensure that all damaged cameras are repaired and returned to service as soon as possible to ensure the network is maintained and people across London can continue to feel the full benefit of cleaner air in their neighbourhoods. The ANP cameras used to enforce the ULEZ have been used to enforce the London Low Emission Zone, LEZ, congestion charge and ULEZ in central and inner London for many years, delivering congestion, reductions, air quality and health benefits to people living, working, visiting in the capital. With the upcoming expansion of the zone, 5 million more Londoners can now expect to breathe cleaner air. Every day more evidence is published highlighting the terrible impacts of exposure to air pollution, even at low levels, which further and faster cycle air pollution. The decision to expand the ULEZ London-wide wasn't an easy one. It's the right decision for London. It'll help Londoners young and old.
Mr. Mayor, if you could just pause 1 second, if it's possible for you to repeat the last sentence again. I think we lost the mic.
Hopefully the Tories won't be penalised with time, but I'll repeat that bit again. The decision to expand... Sorry, is that...
Yes, please.
The decision to expand the ULEZ London-wide was not an easy one, but it's the right decision for London. Have you vandalised it? That's the question.
I'm denying it.
Okay.
Certainly not hearing it out here, Andrew. Certainly not hearing it from here.
Please do. We'll make an allowance for time on that we're always told you shouldn't do that. But carry on.
The decision to expand the ULEZ London-wide was not an easy one. It's the right decision for London, and it'll help Londoners young and old to live healthier lives. Whilst it is a policy, there's a very small minority of those who do not participate. Sorry.
Let's just pause. Could we pause just for a couple of minutes?
Does that help?
Because it is important that the words are actually heard. So we're just going to pause for a couple of minutes, please.
No, shall I just raise my voice?
In terms of that's a problem in terms of the public record, which we must ensure.
Yeah, can't hear it online though. That's the problem, Andrew.
Can we just for 1 minute to allow us to have some technical consultations? Thank you. Now, we want to get through the business today, and we want to ensure that everybody can be heard. There is a suspicion that the problems are with the Wi-Fi, and that may be caused by people having a hotspot loaded on their phones. So just for this session, before we get a more permanent, I would ask if members of the public gallery and members ensure that they haven't got any hotspots running on the Wi-Fi hotspots running on their devices, and that may assist. This is not a promise, but it may assist in ensuring that the microphones are working. So if we could just check our phones and see whether or not they've got any hotspots on them. Thank you so much, and I appreciate. I do appreciate this is difficult for the public gallery, and I do apologise, but hopefully just for this session. Let's get back to business. Mr. Mayor, we were talking about damaged ULEZ cameras.
Whilst not everyone will agree with this policy, I know that it's a very small minority of those who do not who participate in criminal activities. Having taken advice from policing partners and others, TfL has taken the position that it will not be releasing information about the number of cameras that have been subject to criminal damage.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Nothing works, does it? But we'll pile through. I understand the point about the number of cameras not being released. That was the specific question. But actually, I take from your answer that any of those damaged cameras are then fixed and recycled back into the network. Let's say that it goes ahead on August the 29th, which I know is the intention. Are you confident that you have the network required to be feasible, to have a feasible scheme, mindful of those damaged cameras?
Thanks for the question. So I think the Commissioner was asked the very same issue at the plenary, and I had a briefing from TfL last week, and yeah, the TfL are very confident in relation to not just steps leading up to August 29th, but also thereafter as well.
Okay. And so is that using the existing cameras that we've got that went through that procurement process that we talked about very recently, or are there other schemes or other mitigations being put in place to help ensure that there is that coverage for a feasible scheme?
So the number of cameras that TfL originally plans to have by the day of go live, they still are confident what they will have by date of go live, but there are other things TfL are doing, and I'm more than happy for the member to get a briefing from TfL about all the things they're doing, but they're confident they'll get to the number they want to get to by August 29th.
Okay. One of the questions we've been asking is about sort of plan B, preparation. One, if the network isn't ready, if that scheme isn't feasible, and then the second is around the court case. I'll come to the JR in a second about the preparation for that JR, but is the suggestion, and you would have been briefed on this, because the problem's going to be, I can imagine being in your shoes, these cameras are coming down, so there's the reports in the news, and you're saying, all right, guys, what are you doing to make sure that we've got that coverage? You would want to know that there was backup. You would want to know that the equipment was going to be ready. So you are confident that that coverage is, that the network itself is going to be feasible, and they've got mitigation in place should those cameras continue to come down and be damaged, which, by the way, I don't support either, any more than I support putting them up.
So firstly, can I say, I don't for one iota of a second suggest that you raising this issue is to help garner publicity for those committing vandalism. But we're in danger of, though, inadvertently giving them the oxygen of publicity. But just to reassure the member, TfL are confident that there'll be the right number of cameras. Sorry, let me rephrase that. There'll be the same number of cameras up on August 29th that they'd originally planned, and there are no need for Plan B, Cs, or what else.
Okay, it'll be the same types of cameras, be the same sorts of equipment deployed in the same way.
Yeah, there's been no deviation from the confidence. So if you did a RAG rating in relation to the cameras and stuff, and even those councils, if you recall, that those that brought the JR originally not signing the agreement, even in those councils, I said they're not in a critical way of them on this point. the progress being made in those councils as well.
Okay, so actually on that point, there was an article by noted local scribbler Ross Lydell on the 19th of June, which talked about Transport for London is disaster planning 4 possible outcomes from the legal battle. What are those 4 possible outcomes?
Well, far be it for me to ever criticise the Evening Standard's top journalist Ross Lydell.
He's behind me, isn't he?
I think on this particular occasion, I wouldn't accept the word disaster planning, but you'll appreciate, TfL are looking into this on a regular basis. They look at this, daily, weekly. I receive weekly reports, and no complacency. But everyone's working incredibly hard to make sure that they can go live August 29th.
Okay, because on the 2 points, when I spoke with TfL last week, they were saying that they were doing no planning around changes with expected income, which is extraordinary, really. You would think that there would be preparation for any financial impact as a result of a JR going in a different direction. And then in terms of if the scheme is to go live, what nobody would want to create would be rat running or sort of tunnels through a covered area, which would put real pressure on boroughs and residents, because people would very quickly find out that you could drive through the expanded ULEZ that way. And again, I'm interested in the procurement. You remember we had a chat a while back about the cameras and when they were first procured, and you said you were going to go away and find out, and I have had a letter about that. I'll read some of it. It says, TfL took steps to prepare for the contingency of an approved scheme, which included placing orders of components, etc., 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 and it confirms that, as we talked about, that procurement started in April 2020. So that was 1 month before the consultation started, 4 months before it closed, and over a year before it was due to start. Are there any other new procurement processes going on to support the ULEZ expansion?
I'll hold me across that detail, but can I just give you, if it helps you with your concerns, in previous schemes, if it helps you, and it's relevant to this point, so with the C charge and with ULEZ, there is a possibility, again, I'm not with the specifics if it applies here, for there to be mobile cameras as well. And so if your concern is, with the congestion charge, if you remember, there are possibilities of working around and not being caught by the cameras, if you remember. And so I remember from memory, when the congestion charge first came in, there were mobile cameras as well. So if that was your concern in relation to loopholes or routes and stuff, TfL's, it's not their first rodeo. They've done this before in relation to those sorts of schemes. But again, I'm more than happy for you to receive a direct briefing from TfL rather than going through me.
Okay, so mobile cameras like mobile cars, like the sort of CCTV cars you see around, are those being procured, did you say?
I don't know about what's happened about the expansion, but I just know from memory, if your concern is, can people use a clever way of working out where there's not a camera and stuff? I know in the past when that's been a concern, for example, with the congestion charge, there have been mobile cameras used. Okay, and so TfL are going to write to me and let me know if that's... if that's what you want me to do, I'm more than happy for TfL to really either write to you or even meet with you, whatever. But I can speak offline to your office about what's better for you. Yeah, if you write to me, then we've got it as a matter of record. Very quickly, I just wanted to pick up on something else. Again, we spoke about the Superloop buses, and you said that the buses were going to be zero emission on that loop. Just for clarity, your Deputy Mayor Seb Dance wrote to me to say that some of those buses will still be polluting buses. The X26 is still a diesel bus, etc. So the truth is that it will be, the buses on the Superloop will be zero emission once you've done the next round of procurement for the buses. But with the current expansion, they won't all be non-zero emission. I was quite clear what I said, which is that all the new buses yeah, will be zero emission, but all the Superloop buses will be ULEZ compliant, and them being ULEZ compliant has led to a 90% reduction in nitrogen dioxide and an 8% reduction in particulate matter. But just for the clarity from that conversation, it will be the new ones when they come online in how many years is it? I know some will come online imminently. Okay. And then the last bit of that note from Seb, thank you for the indulgence. We're talking about the introduction of quite a few routes. The X34, the X119, the X123, the X183 and the X269 are still subject to the outcome of a consultation. Do you know when that consultation is due to start and how long that could take? I think some of those are ongoing. Actually, I think 3 or 4 of those may already have begun, but I'm more than happy to, when I write to him about the cameras, to also give him a note about when each one of them is starting and completion dates. That would be really useful, and you know, an absolute answer on any potential sort of
mobile cameras or camera cars or anything like that?
On that, I mean, TIF will do what they can, but you'll appreciate, and again, it's for them to explain, it's not me. There may be commercial reasons why they go into details, and also because of concerns about copycat vandalism. I'm more than happy for the member to be, he's had interest in this for a long time, to be briefed by TfL, subject to whatever they may say.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Assembly Member Harani.
Thank you, Chair. The Evening Standard, this was a Rachel Burford article, reported in May that the leader of Harrow Council and Harrow councillors and senior local Tory officials were running a Facebook group that celebrated ULEZ camera vandalism. One post linking to a news story about the destruction was captioned, "Well done." Posts and comments on the group also spouted Islamophobic tropes about you and had unacceptable posts referring to a child sex offender on their page. What are your thoughts on the Harrow Conservatives running a Facebook page that glorifies criminal activity?
Well, I wasn't aware of that. It's clearly disappointing. I mean, look, I want the next 10 months to be a contest of ideas and policies. If people want to bring values into it, fine. It's not the first time my ethnicity and my religion has been an issue in an election to be the Mayor of London. It's just disappointing. And I'd hope everyone in this Assembly would unequivocally condemn that. And the council leader would not just condemn it, but apologise, because Harrow is an incredibly diverse, wonderful borough. And they expect decent leadership, whether it's Conservative or Labour. And so I'm hoping those in the Conservative Party responsible for things like discipline, for issues about bringing parties into disrepute, will look into this issue, and if action isn't taken, condemnation isn't forthcoming, that in itself speaks volumes about the Conservative Party in 2023, 2024.
Assembly Member Hall.
I'm only coming in because I am a Harrow councillor. I didn't know about this, and I absolutely agree with you. Any reference, as you've said, to your religion, to the colour of your skin, anything like that is absolutely abhorrent, and I absolutely condemn it, and I will always say that. So just to clear that one up, I agree it's wrong.
Just checking time. Mr Mayor, I'm doing this from the chair because we have no deputy chair here, so bear with me. Occasionally I may have to tell myself to shut up. But I raised the case concerning ULEZ with you of Mr Kieran Flynn, and who had a vehicle on finance, and who complained that the additional costs of the ULEZ would make his business unviable. You suggested he should consider a grant for retrofit. Unfortunately, his vehicle is not eligible to be retrofitted. Mr Mayor, he has got nowhere else to go. What does he now do short of folding his business?
Well, Chair, the briefing I've got is in relation to vandalism, so I've not got the briefing on that case, but I did ask my office to look into this matter last time, and I apologise profusely if it's not been looked into since last time, including assistance given. Can I get back to you today?
To help you, I did get an email from Deputy Mayor Dance concerning this. I mean, to sum it up, he suggested he should get a bike, and in it, he posted a link that said Mr Flynn can read about our offers available, all of which are not available to him. And when you click on the link, it says, sorry, the page cannot be found. Mr Flynn is going to go out of business.
Chair, I'll get back to you today in relation to what assistance Mr Flynn can get personally.
The next question, is from me. Sorry, so yes, the next question is in the name of the Assembly Member Bath about what provision there is in your free school meals programme for those with faith-based requirements. Mr Mayor.
Chair, you're enjoying this a bit too much, but I'll seek to answer the question. It's shocking that families across the capital are struggling to feed themselves as they deal with the escalating cost of living crisis. It simply cannot be right that in a city as prosperous as ours, around 1 in 6 parents are going without essentials, including food, electricity or gas. No child should be punished for circumstances beyond their control, and no child should be forced to go hungry. I'm determined to do all that I can to help, and I know from personal experience what a lifeline free school meals can be. My siblings and I depended on these meals while at school, and my parents relied on them to give our family a bit of extra breathing room financially. I've set forward with this unprecedented £135 million emergency funding to provide hundreds of thousands of primary school children with free school meals. This funding could help save families around £440 per child across the year from September, ensuring parents aren't worrying about how they're going to feed their children. This programme will provide a healthy, nutritious meal, meaning pupils don't go hungry in the classroom and can better concentrate on their studies. Working closely with schools and every council across the capital to support them to deliver these meals, and working through the practicalities of the scheme. Last week I visited a primary school in Finsbury Park to see how they're preparing for the rollout in September, and to hear from the children who will benefit with Deputy Mayor Joanne McCartney. In developing the scheme, my offices have engaged with a wide range of partners, including faith groups, to inform the development of an equality impact assessment. Although noting that the policy will have a positive impact on ethnic and religious groups, it found that some meals catering for specific dietary needs may be higher in cost. I've therefore agreed that a contingency fund will be allocated for specific and extraordinary costs associated with the implementation of the scheme. Part of this fund will address some of the issues associated with the findings of the Equality Impact Assessment, working closely with schools and boroughs as this additional funding is rolled out. I'll continue to do what I can to support London's families through the cost of living crisis as we work to build a fairer and more prosperous city for all Londoners.
Thank you. After an article by Assembly Member Hall in the Jewish Chronicle and a question by myself, you did make an announcement of some additional funding for contingency, which could include support for those with faith-based diets. Why has it taken such a long time, bearing in mind you announced your the free school meals programme quite a while ago? Why is it that we still haven't got guidance for those schools for the implementation of the free school meals programme? Because, as we know, it will take some time to prepare in many schools. It will require some capital expenditure in some cases in order for the schools to proceed with that programme.
Well, Chair, for the avoidance of doubt, I don't recall any lobbying representations from you or any other member of this Assembly except for Councillor Anne Clark, Assemblymember Anne Clark and Barnet Council, who lobbied me in relation to this issue, along with Jewish faith schools and the Equality Impact Assessment results in relation to this issue. And so there's a huge amount of work taking place in relation to work with schools, not just the work taking place from the 5 boroughs that fund universal free school meals already, but also from GLA and other colleagues in London councils. I'm more than happy to read through all the various work taking place in relation to this. The Jewish schools, by the way, have welcomed our announcement, which was made some time ago, again, with the support of Barnet Council and
the real nub of this question, Mr Mayor, is when will they receive guidance? Because the schools still don't know about how to apply, what preparations need to take place, and that's been a direct complaint to myself.
No, that's not correct. If any schools contacted the chair in relation to a lack of guidance, then he can let us know. We'll show them the guidance, because the schools are ready. I was at school last week and saw for myself the preparations taking place across London. If there's a particular school who say there's an issue, I'm more than happy to raise it with their local council.
Thank you. And just for the record, Assembly Member Hall published this article on the 10th. You saw sight of this question on the 10th, and you came forward with the contingency budget on the 11th. So I'm assuming it works, being an Assembly member.
Well, Chair, can I be quite clear about this? The idea that an article from a member of the Assembly on the 10th would lead to a mayoral decision on the 11th
you
shows a massive lack of understanding of how politics works in London. This was a policy I announced in my budget earlier this year, voted against, I beg your pardon, by the Conservatives. Luckily, it went through with support of Labour, Lib Dems and Greens, cross-party progressives standing up to the Tories in government and in City Hall.
You know that not to be the case. And but you had sight of this question on the 10th, did you not?
Chair, let me be quite clear. Is the Chair suggesting, I beg your pardon, is Assembly Member Boff suggesting that the reason why the mayoral decision was signed, when it was signed, was because of a press article from Assemblymember Hall.
When was my question? When did you see this?
No, that was the assertion that the member made.
When did you see
Does
this
he withdraw that
question,
assertion? Does the member withdraw that assertion?
When did you see
clearly
this
doesn't.
question?
So in response to that assertion that the only reason why mayoral direction was passed was because of an article, unless Ross Liddell wrote it, I probably didn't read it, from Assemblymember Hall, then that's not the case. And I'm really happy for officers to talk through with the member how politics in the GLA works.
The Conservative group is now out of time, so I've got to go back to the accursed neutrality. Here we go. The next question is in the name... Oh, I beg your pardon. Assemblymember Duval.
Thank you very much. God, what an insight into GLA decision-making, Chair. Not just the politics, but if only we could take decisions as quickly as that and be responsive. OK, so we're rightly picking up on a number of important issues with this important policy change that is and will have a major difference on family household incomes. Can we just talk about the future? I know budgets are budgets and we have to go through certain procedures or not, but I get a feeling that actually people want something a bit more longer term and they'll be looking to you for that. Our colleagues in local government, the fact that we're reinvesting back into some important capital in terms of resources into those schools, and I hope they're used more than just for providing schools for that they become some use for wider community use in if it's able to do that, so we get our value for money out of those issues. But what can you tell us about the future? What can you tell us if, things went according to how you would like them to go in terms of the coming years about this particular policy?
Well, it's worth making this point, Chair, in relation to the question asked by Senator Duval is the only reason that the GLA is able to provide £135 million is because of the prudent way I've managed finances in City Hall for the last 7 years. Not wasting money on water cannons or on doing some work in relation to the Thames Estuary airports, but making sure we've got money for that rainy day, whether it's from business rates, reserves, whether it's from GLA unallocated reserves. And thank God there's been prudent accountancy, prudent housekeeping from the Labour Mayor for the last 7 years, because as a consequence of the mini budget lauded by the Conservative candidate for Mayor, a true Conservative budget at last, quote unquote, from the hard right Tory candidate for Mayor. We have more children in poverty now. We have more. They don't like it, do they? They don't like being told the consequences of Conservative policies. And one of the consequences is there are more children in poverty. Some of those whose parents earn below £7,400 are eligible for free school meals, roughly speaking 110,000 children. But there are 210,000 children in poverty but not eligible for free school meals. So we'll be supporting them, but we'll be supporting 270,000 children in primary schools for the first time ever receiving a free school meal. But it's important to understand the only reason we can do this is because of prudent housekeeping. I want to do more. I want to go further. And we'll see what we can do in future years. But it's difficult because I'm afraid from this government, we've had huge cuts to local authorities, huge cuts in relation to the money the GLA receives, and policies that impact on cost of living.
So is it true to say that if we continue to manage those finances well and you monitoring the financial situation, that we could actually look to see where we could go further in this policy in terms of the coming next year's budget?
It's really important to manage expectations, but it's also really important to look at the evidence. So one of the things that we will be doing, in addition to this emergency funding, is having real-time evaluation of the success or otherwise of universal free school meals. Experts like Henry Dimbleby and many others, like Jamie Oliver, many others are being advising us in relation to a good evaluation system. We've been speaking to the 5 councils who already have universal free school meals about what evidence they've seen in their communities. But I don't want to raise expectations which I can't deliver. One of the problems when you do that is if you can't deliver, at least is cynicism amongst Londoners. So I've managed to find the money for the 1 year to help the worst part of the cost of living crisis, but we'll be evaluating the success of this because we could lobby the government. A future government or the current one.
You have new support for that, don't you?
Well, it appears. It's funny what a mayoral election can do. That the Conservative Party are now claiming they've always been in favour of universal free school meals. They've had a Tory government for 14 years. They've never delivered it, and always also been in favour of this in London. Between now and May the 2nd, I expect you'll see many more U-turns. I've even been told that the Conservative mayoral candidate is now pro-diversity. And so let's wait and see how that pans out over the next 10 months.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question...
Chairman, can I just answer a couple of these?
On what basis?
I will just point out, I've been called hard right.
Assembly Member Hall, is this as a point of personal explanation?
Yes, if that's a technical term for defending myself.
The Mayor did refer to Assembly Member Hall by her responsibility. It was specific about her. She may reply.
Thank you. I would just like to point out that I am not far right, and that I do believe in diversity, and I imagine that you will carry on in this way for the next 10 months, which is very bad behaviour from you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, if we now move on to the next item, which, if I'm not wrong, is in the name of Assembly Member Harani concerning town centre policing.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the question. Trust is integral to all aspects of policing. Our model of policing by consent depends upon it. This week, the Commissioner published his new Met for London plan, setting out his priorities and reforms for policing in London. The plan sets out how Sir Mark has already strengthened the Met Police Service leadership locally by introducing the new Borough Superintendent role, which will work collaboratively with partners to build an effective, tailored system of neighbourhood response. In addition, the Met Police Service are delivering on my commitment to every ward in London having at least 2 dedicated ward officers and a police community support officer. This means each ward and borough will have its own locally accountable team for communities. Local policing has been further strengthened with an additional 500 officers to create 20 dedicated town centre teams across London, each consisting of 25 officers. Alongside this, I've ensured the MPS has funding to deliver a further 500 police community support officers who work across every London borough and help the MPS deliver on local priorities, a key recommendation of the Casey review. However, I recognise the damaging impact a decade of austerity has had on policing in London. Baroness Casey's review describes in detail how austerity has profoundly affected the police service. Both the Commissioner and I are committed to addressing the problems this has caused and rebuilding a local community-focused presence. The Commissioner has been clear that his mission is to deliver more trust, less crime and higher standards, and that policing can only be delivered with the consent of London's local communities.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think first of all, I'd like to welcome the publication of the turnaround plan and the renewed focus on neighbourhood policing. In addition, I think to the work that you've been doing in the last year on town centre policing, I know personally from the 2 examples I have in my constituency in Harlesden and Wembley, and others I think will vouch if they have town centre teams in their area about the importance that it has had already in building trust and confidence amongst businesses and local communities where they are placed, and obviously I'd like to see more of them come in. But for areas that span different BCUs, things can be a bit more complicated. For example, I have in my area Kilburn, which is split between Brent, Camden and Westminster and strays between the Northwest, Central North and Central West BCU units. For areas like these, I appreciate that some of this may be operational issues for the Met, but can the Mayor work with the Commissioner to look at more bespoke and unique policing models for areas like Kilburn that span across different BCU units?
Chair, can I thank the member for his question? Just worth reminding ourselves, it's only because of the economic competence of the last 7 years we can invest in more police officers, more community support officers and the town centre teams you are talking about. So it's despite the government cuts and because of our economic competence. So the new borough superintendents that Sir Mark has placed across London, every borough's got one. What I'm happy to do is to work with the Commissioner to speak to the borough superintendent that is responsible for the area to see what more resources can come from outside of the borough to support the borough if there are particular issues in relation to Kilburn, which I know strays into Brent, Camden and Barnet, because that's a good example of artificial boundaries affecting the response to communities' rights. Communities don't think about borough boundaries nor do criminals. So let me take that away and see what the Deputy Mayor, the Commissioner and the Borough Superintendent can do to address those issues.
Thank you. And turning to the additional 500 PCSOs that you are planning to recruit, how can these neighbourhood policing teams work together to understand their local area and use that knowledge to prevent crime from happening in the first place?
This is the core of policing. You don't have to go back to the Pelian principles of policing, but it's the public of the police, the police of the public. And what we know is that it's quicker to recruit a PCSO. PCSOs tend to be more diverse, look more like our city. Some people call it political correctness. I call it making sure that the police looks like our city and therefore can be more responsive. They're more in tune with the community. And that policing by consent means that they get local intelligence, the public trusts them, they report crime, they report intelligence. That leads to crime going down and more trust.
Thank you. Can I now ask the Assembly to suspend Standing Order 2.9b in accordance with the provisions of Standing Order 1.1h in order to allow the remaining business on the agenda to be completed? Nobody appears to be against that. So we'll now move on to the next question, which is in the name of Assembly Member Ahmad, and it's London's cultural sector and levelling up.
Thanks for the question. London's creative industries generates almost £60 billion a year and are responsible for 1 in 7 jobs. Just last month, I published research showing the positive impact London's creatives and creativity has on the wider UK, contributing £13 billion to the exchequer in 1 year alone. But just 4% of the government's £23 billion levelling up funding is directed to London, despite 12% of England's most deprived neighbourhoods being in the capital. This shortfall is damaging to London, its world-class cultural sector and creative industries and the rest of the UK. This makes our work from City Hall even more important. Last week, my Deputy Mayor for Culture and Creative Industries, Justine Simons, launched 3 new creative enterprise zones in Brent, Islington and Westminster. The zones provide access to long-term affordable studios, helping creatives to put down roots, and we're on track to deliver over 70,000 square metres of affordable workspace in the next few years, helping over 5,000 young people, many of them in the members' constituency. I'm delighted that London Borough of Culture will return in 2025 and 2027, following the success of the previous and current programmes in Waltham Forest, Brent, Lewisham and Croydon. I'm also playing my part to preserve grassroots venues through our Culture and Community Spaces at Risk programme, introducing nighttime enterprise zones and investing in fashion, film, games and design through our Creative Economy Growth Strategy. And looking to our future, our investment in East Bank over in Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park will deliver the biggest culture and education district in London for over 150 years.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, we're all proud that London is the cultural gateway to the UK. GLA Economics found that in 2019-2020, London's creative industries contributed £13 billion in taxes, but received insufficient funding from government. National institutions such as the South Bank Centre and the National Theatre are in my constituency of Lambeth and Southwark, and I'm very proud to be able to say that. They've spoken to me and have told me that post-pandemic, because of rising costs, they are finding it very difficult to bring audiences back to pre-pandemic levels. Given that this sector supports 1 in 6 jobs in London, and you've been clear about some of the things that you're doing to support the sector, could you say what you think London should be, government should be doing to support London's cultural sector?
The member will have, thanks for the question. The member will have seen the recent concern by the government making cuts to London's cultural sector. as part of their inverted commas levelling up agenda. And you'll be aware that, for example, the National Theatre puts on performances that tour the country. And if they can't put on these performances, bless you, if they can't put on these performances, the other parts of the country suffer because the additional cost is so expensive. Many of the local theatres can't afford to put in the work. And so the government's in danger of cutting its nose to spite its face by the cuts they've made to London, including the National Theatre, English National Opera, the Donmar, and many others in London. So we're trying to persuade the government to invest in London in the sums that we need, but also where the gateway, you mentioned South Bank, and National Theatre being the gateway, London's gateway to the rest of the country. And you're right, the combination of freelancers leaving the industry during the pandemic, additional costs in energy bills, additional other costs because of cost of living is causing real challenges for this sector. The good news is we're seeing the benefits of our campaigns bringing tourists back to London, bringing people back to London. But if we're not careful, even some of the national treasures like National Theatre and others at the South Bank Centre are really going to struggle going forward. That's why the government needs to recognise that investing in culture is good for those of us who enjoy the culture, but also good for our economy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, interestingly, you talked about levelling up in inverted commas. I personally hate that phrase when it comes to London. It is about bringing London down as far as possible, as far as I'm concerned. What has been the economic impact of London only receiving 4% of the government's £23 billion of levelling up funding, despite 12% of England's most deprived neighbourhoods being in the capital?
One of the things that you see many of our great cultural institutions do is outreach work, because many Londoners, particularly from deprived backgrounds, feel intimidated going to a lot of our wonderful institutions, whether it's the E&O, National Theatre, Donmar. The irony is the government's cuts means the outreach work these places were doing will have to stop. The E&O is one of the most diverse artists of any opera house in Europe. The outreach work they do to make it diverse will have to stop. The Donmar does an amazing amount of work in schools and communities. They'll have to stop that and just focus on commercial side of the business. Often, by the way, reheating old heats is what theatres are telling me that they may need to do. And the same goes for the English the National Theatre. Not every play the National Theatre produces, unfortunately, is going to be a massive hit, right? And that's why it's really important for them to have confidence. They can try new artists, try new plays, try telling diverse stories, and that may be affected as well. And the final point is, you all know in your community, unfortunately, many people in your community themselves haven't experienced the joys of the South Bank, and these cuts will mean they won't be able to do so, which means a future Idris Elba, a future Adele, a future John Boyega is not being produced because of the lack of access to the culture and the craft.
It's tragic, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for highlighting that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question concerned... Oh, I beg your pardon. You do that at the last minute just to test me, don't you? Assembly Member Duval.
Chair, I think you just need to look up. Your recent announcement around trying to step in to save the Commonwealth Games was an important, I think, contributor in terms of the challenges for us if we had to do it. Are we really sure that we're able to do that? You would have done your work, no doubt, when you made that announcement and the offer. But of course, it is about those events that make that contribution, those wider contributions at a number of levels, if you're successful in holding them and working on those. Can you just tell us a little bit more about your thinking and what you think the challenges are in terms of other people that may have a different view of where the Commonwealth Games should be held?
Can I just be clear, without in any way being disparaging to the Commonwealth Games, we've never bid for one since I've been a mayor. The issue is we know the importance of Commonwealth Games for reasons that have been well rehearsed in the media. The current plans for the next one aren't taking place. If the British government wanted our country to host a Commonwealth Games, London's willing to play our part. Just like we offered it with the Eurovision Song Contest, by the way. The point is, the offer's there if the government wants to take up our help. It's not us applying for, bidding for Commonwealth Games. It's not us saying, we're running towards a bid for it. It's just like with Eurovision, we're here in relation to recognising our responsibilities as the capital of our country, us having great assets at our disposal. We'd have to we'd have to build stadia or build the facilities and stuff, but also recognising, and I saw this most recently with the coronation of His Majesty King Charles III, the importance of the Commonwealth. And it's so if the government wants to pursue that, the point was we're willing to step up. But we couldn't do it without the government, really being keen on that happening.
You consider then just reviewing our links with the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, who, over the years, many years, have wanted a bigger relationship with us, given where we, as a major capital city, and play a bigger role within that organisation.
We're more than happy to. During the course of the break the Chair gave us, met a delegation that Sakina Sheikh's brought to City Hall of would-be young politicians from Pakistan, a key player in the Commonwealth. And so I know the importance of us, in a non-patronising way, as we're seen by the other members of the Commonwealth. I spent some time this week with Patricia Scotland, unfortunately at a funeral, but we had a chance to have a chat and the great work she does at the Commonwealth. So I'm more than happy to step up in relation to our role, particularly because I believe, cities of the future. And if the member wants to, get me involved in any more work, I'm more than happy to play my part.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question. Which one are we at?
We are now here, Chair.
We are Assembly Member Sheikh, yeah. The next question concerns the tackling of the climate crisis through planning and is in the name of Assembly Member Sheikh.
Thank you. My London Plan is fundamental to ensuring developments play their part in helping tackle the climate crisis, improving climate resilience and contributing to net zero. All major new developments are required to achieve net zero carbon with a minimum requirement for a 35% on-site improvement on national building regulations. In reality, we're seeing even better results than this. Thanks to the London Plan, in 2021, emissions from proposed new developments were around half what they would have been if they were only required to meet national building regulations, equating to a saving of over 38,000 tonnes of CO2. Where developers cannot achieve further on-site reductions, they must offset emissions. Since 2016, offsetting payments have secured £145 million for London boroughs to help tackle the climate emergency. Applicants for referable developments are also required to carry out whole life cycle carbon assessments, ensuring a development's total carbon impact is accounted for, both its embodied and operational carbon emissions. And my urban greening factor policy ensures new developments make an appropriate contribution to the greening of London, improving both climate resilience and biodiversity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I couldn't be more enthusiastic about this topic. I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that climate change is one of the biggest threats, if not the biggest threats we face. I think we're feeling the sort of front line of that now in London, but many countries around the world have been feeling that for a while. We have guests here from Pakistan, and the flooding this year as well, indicated to us just how serious and devastating climate change can be. So I'm really, really pleased that your policies in the London Plan and yourself, you get it. You get 68% of our carbon emissions in London comes from the built environment. And I find it astonishing, actually, because often we end up talking disproportionately about aviation and car use, when actually a lot of the sort of legislative need that we have to do in London is in our planning policies, and like I said, you get that. So I wanted to ask specifically in terms of education, and so how we can orientate wider public knowledge on this issue, that what are you doing to educate Londoners that 68% of London's carbon emissions comes from the built environment, and that your London Plan is meeting the needs to legislate around it?
Thanks for your question and your comments. The best example, most recent example of that is London Climate Action Week. The biggest of its kind in Europe, the biggest one ever. Hundreds of events taking place across London involving communities, community groups, citizens, businesses, and indeed King Charles III as well. But you're right, we need to do a lot more in relation to this. Look, none of us needs to be a perfect green activist, right? I'm not. But there are things we can do in our own little way to make a difference, and that grows in relation to individual, family, community, area, region, country, and so forth. And so there's a lot we're doing in relation to the Warmer Homes programme we're doing, Future Neighbours programme we're doing. Solar Together was all about encouraging group buying using economies of scale to get people invested in the importance of renewables. The Mayor's Energy Efficiency Fund, which we discussed earlier on. So there's a lot we're trying to do. Indeed, I've written a book to educate people about the importance of this issue. And I think we all got a role to play. I think there's a great quote from Tony Benn, who says the best politicians are teachers. And I think one of the things that we've lost the art of as politicians is to be teachers, to educate people in relation to this issue. And part of that teaching is to tell members of the Assembly not to be so rude and heckle when you're trying to respond as the Mayor to a serious question asked about a serious issue.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for that answer. And I'll just end on the final point, which is hopefully in the next couple of months, the Planning and Regeneration Committee will be releasing our report that looks specifically at this issue, that highlights, like you said, the policies in the London Plan and how we can go even further. And I just, on that last point, wanted to ask, one of the things that you do push developers on in London is thinking about refurbishment over demolition. I wanted to ask how you came to that conclusion in the London Plan to guide them on that.
I mean, the really important about the London Plan is, thanks for your question, is the London Plan is not set in stone. It's in between the London Plan we have, and Jules Pipes spent blood, sweat and tears getting to where we got to, working with communities across the country, that we have policy guidance in between. And so what we tried to do is to have London Plan guidance to develop some of the issues we talk about in the London Plan. So there's a whole life cycle carbon and circular economy London Plan guidance. So developers don't automatically go instantly to demolition, but they think about whether it's possible to refurbish before demolition. And so there is a audit they're required to do. They're required to account for a whole life cycle carbon emissions associated with any demolition to make sure the impacts are better understood. Sometimes, by the way, demolition may be the right route, particularly if the materials used for the new build are far more energy efficient and so forth. And if the aggregate can be used for something else, again, we're recycling. So it's that London Plan guidance is a really important tool, and it's world leading, definitely the best in the country. And the colleagues around the globe are looking at our planning guidance to see how they can emulate that.
Thank you. I agree. It is world leading. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question is in the name of Assembly Member Desai, and it concerns football hate crime.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Sadly, we've seen the number of hate incidents reported at football matches follow the same upward trend as hate crime in other environments. Some of this is because fans are becoming more comfortable in calling out offensive language or behaviour, but we must all do more to eradicate this behaviour from our national sport. The Met Police Service is working hard on this with all London clubs from the Premier League to the National League, as well as with Wembley Stadium. The Met Police Service Central Football Unit has dedicated football officers sharing intelligence on all criminal and antisocial behaviour, ensuring those involved are removed, prosecuted where possible and banned from attending matches. At City Hall, we've been talking to the Premier League about partnership work to improve fan behaviour, particularly around racism and misogyny. My team will be meeting with them again in August. Many clubs are doing great work. For example, Arsenal has worked with the Met Police Service to respond to racism in and around their stadium, including providing hate crime training for their stewards. And West Ham, Millwall and Arsenal are rolling out a system of QR codes on the back of seats that help fans report hate crimes as soon as they witness them. I'd encourage other clubs to explore similar initiatives.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it's good to hear what some of what the various clubs are doing. Firstly, Mr. Mayor, the Women's World Cup kicked off in the early hours of this morning, our time, in Australia and New Zealand, and I'm sure that all of us in this chamber will want to wish the Lionesses all the best.
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, colleagues. Secondly, Mr. Mayor, I've spent the last few months going around various London football clubs at all levels. I visited Tottenham, Millwall, Chelsea, and Dagenham and Redbridge in my constituency. Got to give them a plug. And I also heard from Arsenal, Fulham, and Wimbledon. I wrote to all clubs, all private clubs, English Football League clubs, and some non-league clubs. And that says some of them responded with examples of good practice. I wrote this morning to the FA and to the FL, and your official received a copy of my letter as well, with a list of 10 recommendations, which I won't go into in this meeting, but outline some of the excellent work that clubs are doing in London, but also calling for more support for the lower leagues, and particularly non-league clubs. Would you join me in encouraging football authorities and those football clubs who can afford to pay to support those who cannot? And to give a concrete example, Millwall use a prime advertising space beyond one of their goals to advertise their hate crime messages. They lose around £40,000 in revenue, which for them is a considerable amount of money. So I feel that the authorities, and particularly those clubs who can afford to pay, should look at ways of supporting clubs in the lower leagues.
Firstly, can I just applaud the brilliant work you're doing with these football clubs across London. It really is going to change the legacy of those clubs and how they treat minority fans. Like you, I used to go and watch football in the 80s and was traumatised by my experience of being racially abused and never went back for years. One of the reasons why I support Liverpool is because my only experience was watching football on TV and the radio, because I was scared of going to football matches in London and the abuse I received at terraces. And so we should recognise the huge progress made, but as your campaigning shows, it's still not perfect in many of our stadia across the city. But also I think there's a responsibility for the wealthier clubs, they're not obscenely wealthier clubs, to support those clubs that are really struggling on this area. Because if you change an attitude through sport, that attitude change will be beneficial throughout society and stuff. So any help I can give you, I'm more than happy to give you, whether it's the FA, whether it's the Premier League, whether it's Wembley Stadium. We're doing a huge amount, but more than happy to piggyback on the back of the brilliant work you're doing, which is really transforming attitudes, but also changing the experience of fans going. And who knows, maybe the next generation of Lioness captains and players will be people who previously may have been scared to go and watch the game of football and go because of the work you're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that work will continue over the next few months and into next season. I should say that last week, a report of The Guardian mentioned a report from Kick It Out, that hate crime is not just around racism, but around online abuse, sexist behavior, misogyny, all forms of hate. I won't go into the stats again, but it is on the rise across all categories. Mr. Mayor, so just talking about the rise in hate crime online as well as in stadiums, what are your thoughts about how to deal with this, and what role do you think that the Met has in tackling this particular area of hate crime?
Well, look, you and I have discussed the abuse received by the English players who missed penalties in the men's Euros, right? The heroes, for 2 weeks of the tournament, and they become villains for missing penalties. I don't recall, Gareth Southgate being racially abused for missing a penalty, or Stuart Pearce, right? But these guys were abused because of the colour of their skin, and this is a problem that's, growing, I'm afraid. A number of things need to happen. Firstly, we know a lot of this online hate is not just in London, it's a national issue, it's an international issue. And so we need the government to be doing more work in relation to what can be done in relation to the support for the UK Football Policing Unit, support for the National Online Hate Crime Hub, the Met Police Service, working with other colleagues looking into more football banning orders for online hate crime, but also what about the social media companies? What about the platforms who make huge money and their algorithms, accelerate this sort of hatred and stuff? So there's a lot that can be done from those social media companies, from regulation, but also from working across the country in relation to those responsible for these hate crimes.
Thank you. And my final question, Mr. Mayor, is about the costs of policing football, which is related to the issue of combating hate crime. The more resources the police have, the more they can do to combat hate crime. Just to say that we had Assistant Commissioner Louise Rolfe at the Police Committee on the 7th of June, and she told us that the Met received only around 2.5% of the costs of paying for policing football. Officers are abstracted from neighbourhood teams, etc., etc. And do you feel that the government should be doing more to fund this particular area of the Met's work. London has more clubs at all levels than any other city. I mean, Birmingham has 3 clubs, but most other cities have only 1 club. And just to give an example, West Ham pay £2.5 million a season. That covers everything, the cost of the stadium, of policing, everything. Now look, I'm not having a go at West Ham. They got the deal of the century, a deal that was agreed by your predecessor, a certain ex-prime minister. So it's not having a go at West Ham at all. But it's ludicrous that a £2.5 million contract covers everything.
So I've discussed this with Sir Mark Rowley, who's also concerned about the disproportionate cost of policing football matches to the Met Police's priorities and other priorities. We also have a shortfall of the money received from the national and international capital cities grant. There's actually a legal case as well as government formula that leads to us not receiving the amount of money we receive. We've now got, I think, 6 Premier League clubs, as well as the clubs in the Championship and so forth, and lower league. Sir Mark is live to this issue. He's going to have he's due to have conversations not just with the government but with the football authorities to address that issue, because you're right, it's not sustainable. We're going to make sure that those who go to football feel safe and are safe, those around the stadium feel safe and are safe, but the rest of London's population who aren't going to football aren't being neglected or let down because of the priorities of football that aren't being paid for.
Mr. Mayor, I think clubs, particularly Premier League clubs, should be paying a lot more. Mr. Mayor, I agree with everything you say, except that when it comes to supporting Liverpool. Thank you.
Blemish against your name, Umesh.
The next question, well, Assembly Member Pigeon, you've already covered your question rather skillfully beforehand, so that's... Yeah, that's that. And then the next question is from Assembly Member Russell. Drug testing at festivals.
Thank you. London is known for its thriving festival scene, which attracts people from all over the world and offers Londoners access to global culture. It's important that festival goers can enjoy these events safely. The use of illegal drugs harms individuals, families and communities across our city, and recreational drugs are a part of this. However, all Londoners deserve to be kept safe. I'm committed to working with partners to reduce the harms that drugs cause, including drug-related deaths. I've set up the London Drugs Forum, chaired by Dr. Tom Coffey and Sophie Linden, to develop an effective pan-London whole systems response to drug-related harms and crimes. And I've established the London Drugs Commission to consider evidence regarding the impacts of cannabis on people's lives and communities. The work being done to test for drugs at events is important both in terms of public health and the opportunities it provides for community engagement and public education. There are many ways to reduce drug-related health harms at festivals. These include encouraging people to seek medical help without the fear of criminal repercussions for doing so, the availability of medical assistance, and staff training for individuals working at festivals. I'm aware that the government recently told The Loop, a charity that has been providing drug testing at festivals since 2014, that it must now apply for a controlled drugs licence to continue its work. This new requirement, introduced in the middle of the summer festival season, not only adds costs the charity like this may not be able to afford, but effectively means they cannot operate this year owing to the process for applying for a licence. I've discussed this with my health advisor and at London Health Board last week. We had a wider discussion about the use of drugs and harms reduction. The topic will be discussed at the next London Drugs Forum meeting. The Met already works with organisations who test drugs at festivals and those surrendered in the nighttime economy, and are committed to working with festival organisers to reduce the potential harm caused by drug misuse at festivals and events. It's clear that the government needs to provide clarity on the legal and policy position at drugs testing at festivals, so festival organisers can ensure they have robust strategies in place to keep festival goers safe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and it is very reassuring to hear that you have been in dialogue with The Loop. I've also met them, and they've told me that it's this back-of-house testing where the police maintain oversight of the drugs at all times, which helps with that multi-agency response, which where they gather intelligence and then they can support the health and emergency services to keep people safe. So I was actually wondering if you would consider helping to reduce this drug harm at festivals and other events by asking the Home Office to further re-clarify the shift in the licensing arrangements so that that kind of back-of-house drug testing at festivals can continue.
Thank you for the question. Thanks for raising this really important issue. I'm not sure if the government realises the consequences of what they've done. So you'll know this, but so these are potentially dangerous drugs that one dealer supplied.
Yeah.
That this testing means that they can let everyone know there's a dangerous drug in circulation, and that could save lives. In the middle of festival season, and so the Drugs Forum is looking into this. I'm more than happy to raise this once the Drugs Forums have looked into this, but I'm worried about what happens this summer.
I think there is an issue this summer. I'm going to write to you afterwards with more information because I think your voice could help to keep people safe this summer. Now, some of the most vulnerable Londoners who experience the worst health inequalities don't just use drugs during the summer or at festivals. Now, this cohort of people tend to use opiates, and they are most at risk of overdose. Now, the Assembly Health Committee recommended drug checking services in our report on drug harm reduction. And in your response over a year ago, you said that interventions like these would be considered as part of the multi-agency partnership work of the London Drugs Forum. Now, I've not seen any update in the minutes of the London Drugs Forum about this, and I just wondered if if you're aware that whether they've made any progress on this.
Well, Chair, you'll be happy to know that I'm about to give an example of instant response from the GLA to a point raised by the Assembly. And as a consequence of you raising that point, I'll make sure at the next Drugs Forum meeting they take that point forward, Caroline, because we've got to recognise that even in between festival seasons, there are people who may be taking stuff that's, whether we're not condoning drug taking, right? But it's dangerous in the sense of, everyone's life. We should be trying to support them and stuff. So, can I make sure I'll make sure that's raised at the next meeting.
Thank you. Now, there is a need to get this information about what drugs are circulating and also to link up people who do use drugs to addiction, health and other support services. Now, there's a difference between festival testing and what's known as front-of-house testing, which happens in premises that are actually licensed for this work, and that can really help Londoners, save Londoners' lives. They provide face-to-face, non-judgmental interventions, which are actually just as important as the drug checking, because 95% of the people who use these kind of drug checking services have never spoken to a health professional about their drug use before. So would you also explore with the Home Office and also with your Drugs Forum how you could support provision of these kind of licensed premises type drug testing facilities in London?
It's my fault and nobody else's. I'm not aware of what the members referred to and stuff. I'm happy to take this away and look into it, but I mean, it's my fault, nobody else's. I'm just not aware of what the members are referring to.
Thank you very much.
I wouldn't mind if, I'm sure she will do this anyway, if Assembly Member Russell could share that response with at least myself, and the rest of the Assembly. Thank you. The next question is on low traffic neighbourhood support, and it comes from Assembly Member Berry.
Thanks for your question. Low traffic neighbourhoods are a long-standing tool to reduce through traffic in neighbourhoods and provide a better environment for walking and cycling. To reduce traffic and road danger, tackle the climate crisis and improve air quality, it must be easier for people to walk, cycle and use public transport. Properly planned and delivered, LTNs are one of the quickest and cheapest ways to do this. LTNs reduce traffic flows, make streets quieter and encourage more active travel, with evidence showing that people who live in an LTN tend to do 62 minutes more walking and 43 minutes more cycling per week, as well as driving less. They're also safer. Research shows that traffic injuries decline by half within LTNs and street crime reduces by 10%. TfL has supported boroughs through guidance and financial support to deliver safe, integrated and efficient transport schemes via the Local Implementation Plan Process, LIP. TfL issues guidance to support boroughs develop their LIP delivery plans as part of this process. They share data to help boroughs identify where LTNs might be beneficial. Borough delivery plans are assessed by TfL to ensure they align with the transport strategy and that they take account of wider transport considerations such as impacts on bus services, Funding is then allocated to individual schemes. TfL supports boroughs in developing their designs, including using operational guidance and insights from TfL's road and bus network teams to inform designs and reduce the risks of wider impacts. TfL also provides guidance on how to maximise the outcomes from LTNs, such as helping deliver cycle routes through new LTNs to connect London's wider cycle network. We're continuing to work alongside boroughs to monitor the impacts of LTNs, and TfL has issued guidance to boroughs on consulting and engaging with communities, particularly where they've used emergency or experimental traffic orders to implement changes quickly, initially on a temporary basis. TfL will continue to work with London boroughs to identify how it can provide additional guidance on delivering LTNs and how TfL and the boroughs can learn from each other to develop even better schemes in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's good to hear about that work just laid out like that. A lot of it's from your cycling action plan as well. Now, the evidence is so clear now that low traffic neighbourhoods really work, changing streets so that they're safe and appealing to walk around. To me, it's a transformative policy of the very best kind. Now, the support's overwhelming too. Polling very recently has shown that people want to keep the ones we have. Now we've got 58% of Londoners supporting the development of more low traffic neighbourhoods, and that's going up as well. And I can see why, because they don't just cut car traffic, they're wider benefits come in quickly, like quieter streets, more accessible streets for everybody, places where children can play safely in cleaner air, and they're inexpensive investments for the good that they do. So Londoners need more of them, they want more of them, but I'm not sure we've got enough of a pipeline of strong schemes coming through at the moment. There is controversy, but we can't lose momentum, can we? So would you agree that London needs hundreds more low traffic neighbourhood schemes, and are you offering enough support, both practical and moral support, given the importance and urgency of this work?
Well, look, the evidence is quite clear. I've said in my answer in relation to the benefits of good LTNs across our city. One of the challenges that we have from City Hall and TfL is a lot of these roads aren't owned by TfL or controlled by TfL, so you've got to work with communities and councils. There are some really good examples of councils having a decent pipeline of LTNs. The problem is obviously funding. Our problem's been the lack of certainty from the government in relation to funding. We've got no funding from the government for capital next year. And so, we support councils through the LIP process that I've said. And the LIP process essentially is active travel, which is what you're talking about. And so where a council wants to have active travel, we'll support them financially. And as I said, lots of guidance and support in relation to how we can make it work.
I'm just wondering if you're leaving too much of the work up to councils and campaigners to do. If I look on the TfL website or the GLA website, there isn't a page making the case for low traffic neighbourhoods. There's a blog I can find, but quite honestly, people like campaigns like Possible, people like Living Streets, they're doing a lot of your work in terms of communications here. When's the last time you went to a low traffic neighbourhood to be photographed there and really be a champion of these schemes, for example?
Well, I'm a bit nervous giving details of being photographed because one of the people standing against me to be the mayor criticising me for being photographed too much.
Well, I'm asking you to show political courage. This is the whole point.
God forbid. So I'm in danger of winning one flank. I'm in danger of winning one flank and losing the other flank.
We just discussed the fact that 58% of Londoners want more of these things.
Listen, my record in relation to this is one I'm incredibly proud of. And it's really important because the choice, is encouraging more people to walk, cycle, use public transport, or by default encouraging them to jump in their cars. And so I would support councils with good LTNs and be more than happy to be photographed.
With my last 20 seconds, I'm also going to write to you on a practical note because I think councils may also benefit from having more hands-on technical support from your teams. I think they struggle to find the expertise, to have the confidence that they're bringing in good schemes, and getting these in is about getting them right as well.
Sure. Sorry, but I'm afraid the member for Brighton is out of time.
Chair, before...
if he wants to reply.
No, I wasn't, Chair. I just wish you and members a good summer.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to reply. Yes. Oh, I beg. Assembly Member Moema. Perhaps Sol.
I was just going to say, before we say farewell for the summer, that I have really welcomed you coming to Leighton to visit the low traffic neighbourhood.
Was I photographed there?
You were. Black and white, it's recent. Absolutely, I can send you a copy of my
newsletter.
newsletter.
Front page of the Standard, Tony.
And it was great for you to meet Cycle Sisters and others in the community at that low traffic neighbourhood. But happy summer to everybody.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Chair, can I just, on a serious note, I genuinely wish everyone a really good summer. I may not see some of you for a few weeks. Some of you I'll see a lot more over the next few weeks. But, and also your staff, who I know work incredibly hard in between meetings as well, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You are, unless I've missed, and I apologise, I have missed a few hands going up in this meeting. But you are now free to go, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. Can I ask the Assembly to agree the motion as set out in the agenda in my name, which is that the Assembly notes the answers to the questions asked?
Noted.
Can I, the next item about the proposed delegation of authority, can I ask the Assembly to agree in relation to urgent matters only a general delegation of authority in respect to the Assembly's powers and functions, apart from those that cannot under the Greater London Authority Act 1999 be delegated, be given to the... Sorry, I know we want to agree it halfway through, but I have to go through to the bitter end on this one. Be given to the Chair of the Assembly in a consultation with the Chair of the GLA Oversight Committee, party group leaders and relevant committee chairs from the close of this meeting until the next meeting of the Assembly, which will be the plenary meeting on the 7th of September 2023. Now, if you can remember all that, do you agree? Members will also see that there is a report on the agenda regarding the vacancy for the Chair of the Transport Committee. Can I ask for nominations for the office of Chair for the Transport Committee for the remainder of the 2023-2024 Assembly year? No, it's not agreed. I want a nomination.
Sorry. If I may, Chair,
yes.
Bring things to a rapid conclusion, I would be delighted to propose Assembly Member Prince as Chair of the Transport Committee for the remainder of this Assembly year.
Is there a second for that?
I second, and is it 5 minutes for a speech? No, I'm joking.
Only if it's all about Assembly Member Prince.
I declare that Assembly Member Prince is the Chair of the Transport. I should have referred to Assembly Member Prince as the member for Congo, because that's where he is at the moment. So I declare Assembly Member Prince the Chair of the Transport Committee for the remainder of the 2023-24 Assembly year. Okay?
Yep.
No. Yep. The next scheduled meeting of the Assembly will be on the 7th of September at City Hall. There is no urgent business. I now close the meeting. Okay?
Thank you, Chair.
This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.